which is in Canyon ISD, which is in Region 16. I drove 8 hours to be with you today, so please know that I think this is incredibly important. Just a little bit about my background. I do have a BA in Management Information Systems from Texas Tech and MBA in General Business. Numerous technical certifications, and I worked as a systems administrator, application developer, and quality assurance analyst in the IT world for nearly a decade. So I do understand how blockchain seems like a win, how we're moving all the data online, we're eliminating inefficiencies, but I am really worried about the unintended consequences and really us understanding about whose data it is and data privacy. I want to share a story with you. On April 27th of this year, I received an email from Canyon ISD letting me know that my district had signed up with Greenlight Credentials. Greenlight Credentials is a leader in blockchain technology. They were going to give, and I quote, "my child access to their high school transcripts 24/7, unquote. So essentially my independent school district made an agreement with an independent non-governmental third-party corporation to share my child's data without my consent or his consent because he was 18. And then they notified us that if we wanted to have access to the data, we must create a log in and waive our FERPA rights, our Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, in order to access the data. I'll also add that Greenlight is also promoting that we upload our immunization records because you have to have meningitis immunization to go to college. And so I can only see it's just a really short jump before all the coaches that have to get immunization data for students when they were going to participate in athletics to say, hey, we already have this Greenlight locker. Why don't you just go ahead and log in, upload all of that, and then they're going to have all of our children's immunization data. They're also promoting that you upload any other kind of information. So there's also another component of what's happening in K through 12 with data on the social emotional learning. They are also gathering they're also making contracts with their third-party vendors, and our children are logging into these systems, and they're grabbing our children's data that way. So again, the main point of this is just I would like you to keep blockchain out of K through 12. I want you to really think about whose data it is and make sure that we have consent before our children's information is uploaded. Second issue is just security. I know this is supposed to be absolutely secure, but I would ask you to just really think through that. And mainly just the unintended consequences of this moving forward, because whoever has the data, not owns the data, but whoever has the data has the power. And so once we upload everything, I'm concerned that we, the people, or our children are going to lose power and control. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Does anyone have? Yeah, Pat.
Thank you for driving this distance to share this insight with us. Thanks a whole bunch. I'm curious, the concerns you've expressed about the privacy of your child's data, the folks who had that data, the school district, how have they explained to you why or on what basis they shared that data with a third party?
I'm really glad you mentioned that. There was absolutely no discussion at board meetings. I can't find anything in comments. The first notification the district received was then as parents received the email, and I think it was just seniors, or else I wouldn't have known about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
This time, I'd like to take chair's prerogative. I just want to say, I am a mom of little kids in K through 12 public schools as well, and I recently experienced, so my school district was hacked, just broadly, and so because I am who I am, my kid uses a Linux-based computer with like extra privacy controls that when she took it to school, the idea was to keep her protected from such things. So I do understand the concern, and the question I have is, are you concerned about K through 12 privacy more broadly, or just in respect to blockchain technology? So if we were to take up the issue and make recommendations, would it be, would your recommendation to us be to focus only on the blockchain technology issue as you see it, or to focus on more a broad like Bill of Rights for kids in K through 12, for example? Just not that that's what we're doing, but just for example, in terms of policy recommendations, which would you prefer?
No, I appreciate that question. No, I think we ought to keep blockchain out of K through 12 completely, but it would be more that they're sharing our data. I'd like them to keep it in a repository with the district only and not share with any third-party vendors under the guise of educational use, and then they can do whatever with the data and share with other parties without our permission at all, or even notification.
Thanks very much. Anyone else?
Well, I also appreciate very much making the drive. I know how long a drive that is firsthand myself, and so thank you for doing that. I appreciated the questions from my fellow colleagues up here, and specifically, thank you for enlightening us that there really was no communication from the school district in your particular situation, the story that you told us, that you really were just really taken back by the fact that no one really discussed this beforehand, and there was no conversation amongst the PTA members or any disclosure really in your assessment, it sounds like, to the parents broadly. So I think that's another big takeaway for me as a lawmaker, and communication with the school districts and for the panel as well in terms of what it does ultimately in terms of recommendation. So thank you very much for the feedback.
Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Ms. Haynes, thank you for making the drive. And like our chair, I also have daughters, and I notice Richardson ISD here on this document. I live in Richardson, and so my kids will go through Richardson ISD. And I do want to state that my views are my own and not the views of the committee, but I fully concur with your concern about privacy and the need to protect children's privacy. K-12, it's an important thing, and it's a testament to your commitment and your colleagues' commitment here to be so cognizant and so aware and concerned that you would make such a drive and such a commitment to be here all day. And your kids are obviously have activities today that you otherwise could have been at. And I do want to draw the distinction between permissioned and permissionless. There's different types of blockchain, so perhaps there's opportunities to have conversations about that. But I do agree that privacy should be a paramount concern, and we will certainly be taking that into account. And most of the committee's work does not pertain to education, but in this instance, with the concerns that you have brought up and many of your colleagues are bringing up, we will take that to heart and very much consider that and write in the report what we are able to come to agreement on as a committee about privacy. And I think you'll find broad agreement that privacy is a great concern of this committee. Thank you.
Excellent.
Anyone else? Thank you so much for your time and for making the drive.
Thank you. Thank you again.
And Jackie Bestinger? I'm sorry, am I pronouncing your
Good
last
morning.
name?
Yes, I'm Jackie B. Singer. It's hard. So I am here for myself, and I'm also here for Moms for Liberty parents in Travis County. I hold a Master's of Business Administration and a Master's of Healthcare Administration. I understand the blockchain idea. I understand that it's great in the business world, but I reflect on the common law that limits the remedies where the Constitution protects the right of privacy. I have always been, has been always my concern as a conservative parent, because I believe that privacy focuses on protecting the privacy of the individual. And I feel that this is more of a government intrusion, as we see that this is being introduced in our districts. Some of the districts are already waiting for the green light to pass this bill so that they can introduce blockchain and take privacy away. So I look at under the constitutional law, and I see the greater emphasis on protecting the individual's personal privacy. In particular, in 1967, the Supreme Court Cass versus United States explains that the Fourth Amendment, while not creating a general right to privacy, nonetheless protects us, the people, and guards our privacy. Privacy that can be broken time after time in certain times of our life because of the government intrusion. I would like to remind all of you that we have bigger problems in our school systems right now. CRT and pornography, iPads that have taken education out of the classrooms, and now we want to introduce blockchain that takes away all our privacy. It sounds great if you don't understand the gravity of the issue, but we're not here to vote for a system that will take away our children's privacy. Blockchain is a newly developed mainstream technology that has no data to support really the reliability of the system. Even outside the context, blockchain is increasing their reliance on servers that need more power and will need more power when processing the influx of people that you're wanting to introduce. Blockchain takes a bigger environmental impact, but I am sure that you probably have another idea of how this is going to be worked out when it comes to green technology. But the matter is that our privacy will no longer be our privacy if we continue to have this new technology in our school system. K-12 should not have this in their school system.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have questions? Representative Parker.
I just want to thank you for coming and appreciate your feedback. And again, the legislation that has been passed created the study group that is here. And so it is studying these issues, getting feedback. It will then make a recommendation to myself as a lawmaker and to the other lawmakers in the state of Texas about how we proceed, how we utilize blockchain, where we use it, where we don't. So the feedback is excellent. I share your views 100% with regard to privacy protection and protection broadly in K through 12, and not to take this approach of an invasion of people's privacy. So I appreciate the feedback very much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being here.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank
For
you.
testifying. Thank you. Anyone else? No. All right, at this time, I'll call the next three speakers. Mary Lowe, Lynn Davenport, and Sam Padilla.
Tight squeeze here. That's because I'm there.
For all those planning to speak, you'll get a warning in 30 seconds. The second your time is up.
Is it on?
Okay, so first.
Is it on?
Yes, we can hear you. Mary Lowe?
Hi, my name is Mary Lowe. Thank you so much, Representative Parker, for inviting me to come here. I'm sure you didn't realize I was going to work to fill your room, but we appreciate all of your time and your investment, as well as your creating a study group so that we could have the opportunity on the front side to put forth information. I operate in the purview of protecting children and families, and currently my area of emphasis is from government overreach. I'm here today to compel you to reevaluate the priority on humans, the people, your children, and human interaction, my grandchildren, and the future, and what it looks like when you remove humans and replace it with a very electronic, automated system that blockchain represents. What happens is that you're going to monetize bureaucrats and you're going to empty the employment field in a common area. We already see that happening in a lot of retails, and I would like for you to consider that on the negative side of the spectrum when you evaluate what you're doing. It also generates an enormous amount of cash flow through education when you implement it into education, and it seems a little grifty. I first saw blockchain in the Texas Association of School Boards in a monolith of propaganda. And I say propaganda because the Texas Association of School Boards takes the law that you people write and they manipulate it to be politicized in a purview that, or an idea that promotes their political point of view. So I discovered that and then went on a deep dive, and I ran into Rep. Tan Parker, who will soon be my senator, and saw that he had been associated with blockchain and green light. Now, admittedly, technology is, and the progression of technology is not my area of knowledge. marketing is. It is my son's, however. In 2017, he sold his first company to Blackbaud. If you're involved in technology, you recognize the name Blackbaud. Concluding my Cliff Note training with my son, of explaining to me thoroughly exactly how blockchain operated and that it was already in existence, it's not new technology, he said, "Mom, you're not going to stop it. And the issue with blockchain is not the technology, it's who's in control of it and whether or not you can trust them." And he said, history says you cannot trust your government. Texas Penal Code 21.11 and Texas Civil Practice 129 and Family Code 32 protects the rights of minors' information to be held in privacy and to not be carried forward into their adult life. Blockchain is immutable, and it would violate that right that we afford our minors in our country. Are you going to make me stop? No. Okay, I will conclude. Thank you. So I've provided you with a packet of information. The multiple packet is to validate to you the information that we see. MIT is credible. These white documents are all valid sources. And then I've also shown you where blockchain is being used in the schools. My biggest concern is that the virtue signaling from the governor is that we're going to move forward with vouchers for school choice, and that you're going to put the vouchers on blockchain. And it's a soft entry in order to get all the children and all the parents, all the adults onto blockchain, which then becomes a standard for social grading. And so I would ask you to write laws that restrict any use of blockchain in government education. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone have questions? Yeah, Chris?
Thank you for coming and testifying today. I just, on a personal note, it's not representing anyone else's perspective. I've been a lifelong advocate of personal privacy and security. So I'm very sensitive to these kind of questions. And I'm also a technology practitioner and investor. One of the areas that I see that's kind of being discussed today is the permanence of blockchain or time chain type records. But it seems like this problem also goes beyond, because traditional databases are actually much more efficient, repositories of information. The permanence might not be there, but the duplication of those databases also might be a problem. I'm just curious, do you really feel like blockchain is the crux of this, or is there a broader discussion around other policies that you're focused on as well?
Well, the way we see it is that and there's already been testimony. I adjusted my testimony so I didn't replicate what some other people have said. But there's already, if you see like these silos of data that's being collected throughout government education. And by the way, it's not because the government has authorized it. Just so you know, you think you're going to write a law that's going to keep some of this from happening, and it doesn't, because there's no penalty. So even if you said, we're going to write all this around it and we're going to let it be there, they don't follow the law because there's no consequence. And so they're gathering all of this information already. And so when you put blockchain in, what it does is it hovers over these silos of information, whether it be Rhythm, Panorama, Dashboard. These are all educational digital platforms. Blockchain comes in and it goes and it sucks it all up into one. And you talk about a personality profile, like Facebook has these algorithms that they create an identity of a person from the information that they put on there. This is gonna do the same, but it's not gonna be from an algorithm, and it's gonna be immutable, and it is gonna be sold. And I just don't see how you can even begin to allow it in there. Furthermore, I handed you a white document that says from MIT that 51% of blockchain is hacked. So that's dangerous.
So as a clarification, the MIT article is talking about the 51% attack of Ethereum Classic, which is not the same thing as saying 51% of all blockchains are hacked. That's what you call the attack on the blockchain, is a 51% attack. That's like the name of a certain kind of.
So let me go even further, though. It is hacked. They are hacked. That's not debatable. And furthermore, inside government education, they're not even compliant with SIPA. which I gave you the laws on SIPA, which is Child Internet Protection Act. So there's no way you're going to be able to institute and be in compliance. Our schools can't even keep pornography out via the internet because they're not in compliance with SIPA. So for you to come forth now and say, hey, we're going to let you use blockchain for a voucher and in any format, it forces it, and then it can't be protected. I mean, it just cannot be protected inside the government education system.
So I just want to clarify what a variety of my colleagues have said, which is that, so A, we are a study group. We don't do.
Right. No, I understand
So
that. But
we don't write we don't have the power to write the laws you're suggesting, A. But B, we are, as a variety of my colleagues have said, many of us, both personally and professionally, are concerned about the privacy issues you're discussing, and your comments are not falling on deaf ears. I just want to state that. But any other questions or comments for the...
Mary, thank you for being here, and very much appreciate you bringing colleagues as well to share everyone's thoughts today with the working group. So this is really fabulous feedback. Again, it's what the vision was to be able to have public testimony, to be able to get everyone's feedback on where we apply these technologies and where we don't. I wanted to stress again, from a legislator's perspective, that we've had no discussion whatsoever, zero, about blockchain and vouchers or anything along those lines that you're just describing, just for clarification for the record. So that is out there being discussed or what have you in the newspapers perhaps, but we as lawmakers have taken no action, having no conversations about those things. And again, this working group will issue a report. That's what these men and women here are doing. They will issue a report to me and the other members of the legislature, and then we'll take action accordingly when we open up the next session in January of 23. So just for clarification again for everyone, but I just appreciate the feedback and your concerns, and I think you've articulated those very, very well. This has been very beneficial to me.
Thank you, and I do understand that, but your governor has virtue signaled and spoken to the media about leading in blockchain. And one of his other areas of emphasis has been education. So the weight of this committee will be huge. So your recommendation will be huge, and we're asking you to take a very firm stance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and for the feedback. Next is Lynn Davenport.
Hi, thank you. Lynn Davenport. I live in Dallas, and I'm a member of the Parent Coalition for Student Privacy, but I'm here representing myself. And so I'm just going to jump right in and kind of tag team on what Mary was saying. So I think since Abbott has declared that he wants to be the leader in blockchain as far as the state is concerned, it's possible that he will use the momentum created by this group and use it in other areas. And so you may have nothing to do with education, but it will be used to further the agenda of blockchain in education. So that may help clarify a little bit, because you may have nothing to do with that. And then so as far as I'll give you an example of how the threat of blockchain it will impact education, is that if one company has a monopoly on a blockchain technology, in Dallas, it's what they call a life locker or life transcript. And so the concern is that if one company has a monopoly on that, that's not really decentralized. And hi, Natalie, we've talked about this before. When you look at the enormous power that company can have, you see how the concerns that the parents have, that can be used for vaccine history, that can be used for mental health data, which they have an app for. It can be used for your transcripts, your credentials. All of that can be, that power is given to one company in Dallas ISD, which is being scaled statewide. And so it's through Dallas College, through other community colleges. And so here's an example that is happening in Ethiopia. You all are familiar with Cardano. Cardano's Charles Hoskinson has talked about putting 5 million children, Ethiopian children, on blockchain so that their whole life is tracked on this. It is going to be scaled to all of Ethiopia, so to 100 million people. So the same thing is going to happen in Texas, because Mike Morath was appointed by Abbott. Mike Morath is connected to the company that is doing these blockchain wallets for students. And we know that, that Todd Williams was listed on Mike Morath's application to be the commissioner, and he is the founder of Commit. And Commit was the one that chose a company in Dallas, Greenlight Credentials, to be the blockchain provider. So thinking about the enormous power that Abbott has given Mike Morath, that is a major concern, and he's already had a major scandal with data mining. There's data mining, data harvesting going on at the Texas Education Agency. He has carte blanche. There's no teeth in the data privacy. Texas has very strong biometric protections, but there's no teeth because no one's enforcing it because everyone's, let's just say that both parties are in on this with him. So I testify a lot on bad bills because I look at the unintended consequences of these education bills. In the legislature, Representative Parker, I know you know there's more than half are education bills. So education is a major target. If you look at education and workforce, okay. I used to, for 11 years, I coached unemployed people. So workforce and employment is near and dear to me. Workforce training is not the same as education, and I know that with this blockchain industry, there's going to be a heavy focus on getting people trained in the technology so that we can expand this industry. That will replace a lot of the academic foundation. As you all know, workforce is a big issue in education, both at the K-12 level and in higher ed. So that's just a sidebar there. But in looking at Cardano's Atala Prism is what it's called. It will connect healthcare, education, voting. We know that I know you all have probably heard about voting on blockchain as a means to secure our elections. That is not a good idea. And then digital ID is essentially what it is. And so we could be opening up the potential to have all of our lives being tracked and traced through this technology, and then skills and badges and being able to verify your credentials. All of that will eventually be on blockchain if we allow that. Yes.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone have questions or comments in return? Pat?
Thanks for attending and sharing your comments on this. I'm struggling to make a distinction from the testimony so far, so I'm just going to ask you as the last one I've heard on this topic. As one who has practiced in the area of privacy and security for well over 2 decades, I'm familiar with the challenges of privacy and the effectiveness or lack of privacy laws. I see it up close in my practice. The challenge I'm having so far this morning is I think you will find broad agreement on the need for restrictions of disclosure and use of data. I think you'll find
An
broad
informed
agreement.
consent, right.
Yes, without consent, informed consent by people who actually are properly informed. I think you'll find broad consensus on we need to restrict the use and redisclosure of lots of data, and not just K through 12 kids.
Correct.
In contrast, blockchain is but just one technology. It's but one medium, one media, one method of sharing. Is it your view that the Texas legislature or this working group should be recommending outlawing blockchain? Or is it your focus there ought to be greater emphasis on prohibiting, restricting the disclosure, redisclosure, and use of a broad range of data?
Well, I mean, just at the most basic level, it is just a way to store data, right? I would say that if you as a committee, if this is the direction that you want to go to expand the industry, I would say, what you're proposing is a tokenized economy, and so I am against it. And I don't think we understand that the technology of choice is blockchain for digital IDs. And we're talking about digital passports to be able to travel abroad. All of that, you could unknowingly be imposing without, I mean, you may be just in the Bitcoin mining industry, or you may be in something to do with energy, or you might be looking at it from transactions and smart contracts, or just e-signatures. I think, I'm jumping around here, but also the creation of jobs translates to the elimination of jobs, because sometimes cutting out the middleman is cutting out it's cutting out people, it's cutting out jobs. So we could be creating this sort of a virtual metaverse and not realize that's what we're doing here. So I guess, I don't think, like she said, her son said, "Mom, you can't stop this." So that's unrealistic. But I do think that we can at least acknowledge what the pitfalls are, and do we really want that? Do we want a global currency? Do we really want vaccine history and all of that and that could lead to the whole social credit. You can cut people out of systems, if you don't comply. So I don't know, it's just, there's a whole realm of issues.
Can I ask a
Yes.
clarifying question, though? To hone in on the question that was asked, and it's a version of the question I asked earlier. If we, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, we said no blockchain in all of Texas, right? And then the school districts adopted versions of AI and database structures to do the exact same things you're talking about. Would that still concern you?
Well, yes, because
Right,
I was
so
talking about
then-
AI long before blockchain.
So then the question becomes, would you prefer that the law protects privacy broadly, regardless of the mechanism used to collect the data and reshare it and disclose it without consent? Or would you prefer that we focus only on blockchain in that context? That's the
Oh, well,
question.
there's never been an opportunity to hold anybody accountable to the other. So now this, I believe, is the perfect tool to then remove all rights. So, those were issues long before blockchain was in the picture. Yes. But we've had no luck. I mean, Representative Parker, I know you had a social impact bond bill that literally allowed for investors to turn a profit on math scores. There's massive data mining going on through that. But you probably didn't know that. You're thinking, okay, Marath says, this is a great technology to use for math software. You didn't think about that, because why would you? I mean, that wasn't your intention of bringing that bill forward, but that was the result of it. But that's a whole other subject. But yes, we have issues in data mining in K-12.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Lynn, I appreciate you being here and appreciate your testimony very much, and broadly giving us your thoughts and the Q&A with my fellow colleagues here that are part of this working group. So, first of all, I'm very grateful for that. Look, I think the question that's been asked a couple different ways is clear that, we are very focused as a legislator. I'm going to speak as a legislator. Privacy is very important to me, and as the former majority leader, caucus leader of the Republican House over the years, privacy is a top issue for my Republican colleagues, and I think, frankly, it's a bipartisan issue for a lot of my Democrat colleagues as well. So I'll just give you that perspective to kind of set the stage. So your comments around being able to put in place, if you will, greater protections for privacy broadly beyond blockchain resonates with me, and I think it resonates with folks here on the stage. I think it's what you're really getting to. So I want to just clarify that I think you will see additional legislation addressing privacy broadly here during the next session that I think you'll probably find to be beneficial to your concerns with regard to K through 12 and broadly more concerns around society as a whole. Your specific issues around a national or a global digital currency that you mentioned a moment ago. Let me be very clear in my comments. I have publicly spoken against that. I support bit mining. I support obviously all the digital assets that we're seeing. To me, it's a freedom and liberty play that also is in America's best national security interests. But I absolutely do not support a national or any kind of global currency, just for clarification, just so you know where I'm coming from. Your comment about social impact bond, completely different topic. Love to have that conversation offline with you.
Sure.
But I'm happy to give you my thoughts on that and how that why we put that in place and what it does to ultimately, in my opinion, save the taxpayer resources on programming that otherwise wouldn't be explored. And of course, those philanthropic dollars that could come from you individually, you and your family could provide.
Yeah, but that's not how it works.
For a project.
Philanthropy is a gateway to
Well, it could.
control, and that's how it works.
Well, I disagree with respectfully in that
Well,
regard.
that's how it's working in Dallas education. Yeah.
Well, again, I can only speak for what the state has done at a state level. But what I would tell you is that anyone can provide those resources, so to speak, and they take risk with those dollars. Again, I don't want to get on a distraction. They take the risk of putting those dollars up for a particular project. If that project doesn't meet the specific key performance metrics that were established at the beginning, that, in my opinion, create greater efficiency for all government and therefore good for the taxpayer, then those philanthropic dollars are lost. They don't get a modest philanthropic humanitarian rate of return. So again, that's another topic for the day, but I'd love to have that conversation with you further. But I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your comments very much on these concerns and worries and about privacy broadly. And I think you'll be pleased with what this body does. Obviously, this body does not interact with Commissioner Morath. I do as a lawmaker, and my fellow
Right.
colleagues do, but they're independent bodies.
No one's going to hold him to it. I mean, that's the thing. There's no teeth in the law. We already have great laws and protections in place and policies, but they're not being enforced because who is over Mike Morath? Abbott. Okay, and so there's no accountability for him either. And so you as lawmakers and just people in positions of power should be calling that out. And there needs to be some sort of audit or an evaluation of how we're doing things from a data privacy standpoint. No one's talking about it that I can see as far as the legislators.
Well, I'm glad that you're bringing it forward. Obviously, at the end of the day, we obviously work closely with the governor as the legislature broadly and work closely with TEA. And so I appreciate you sharing your concerns in that regard. We can have further dialogue as well about what we do to make certain that every agency of government is accountable ultimately to the legislature and to the governor and ultimately to the 30 million people that call Texas home. So I'd love to have that conversation with you further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sam Padilla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the members of the working group. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Sam Padilla. I am a blockchain cloud engineer at Google, but today I'm here on behalf of ATXDAO. And for those who may not be aware, ATXDAO is a decentralized autonomous organization operating out of Austin. We're pioneering the concept of a city DAO. A city DAO simply is a grassroots bipartisan organization dedicated to help deliver on the promises of blockchain technology to the cities where they operate on. Currently, the only city DAO in the world is ATXDAO, and then we're trying to precisely deliver on those promises of blockchain and make Austin the crypto capital of the US. The way that we do this is by three main ways. So we first act on promoting events, connecting the local Web3 community. We also do a lot of projects with local artists, local businesses to try to onboard them onto the Web3 economy. And third, and that is the reason why I'm here today, we work closely with the city government and the state government to try to advise on sound policy, as well as just overall make us available as a resource for legislatures. On the policy front and on the civic engagement front, we are here to actually raise concerns about a new project that wants to launch in Austin called CityCoins. CityCoins has been in the talks with the city of Austin to try to launch an Austin branded coin, and there's chances also that they may want to expand on this into other cities. We submitted written testimony to the members of the working group outlining our concerns as to why we believe this is a rushed decision, and we believe that the impacts of CityCoins to the overall city of Austin will be broadly detrimental. It is with great concern that we look at CityCoins' desire to expand to Austin and possibly other cities of the state of Texas, and we strongly advise this group not to move forward with that project. And as I said, at ATXDAO, we are making ourselves available to advise on any sort of policy that may be put forward. And if you have any questions specifically about CityCoins, about the arguments that we have against them, I'm happy to take them now, or I'm happy to take them after you have the time to take a look at the public testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here and for your comments. For my part, I will have to ask questions after I dig through the very large packet.
It was a very thorough study. And again, we're looking at this from a purely factual perspective, looking at the past record of failed implementations that they've had, looking also at the economic model that does not benefit the cities where they operate in. And we're advising not in regards only to the city of Austin, we're advising in regards to the broader state of Texas. They are trying to expand to many other cities, not just Austin. The only official right now is Austin, but they're trying to expand to other cities, and we want to warn against possible impacts of it. Because again, we believe the blockchain can bring a lot of good things for the community, and we're trying to lead the charge on filtering things that may be detrimental, either for local businesses, for education, as we were mentioning. We want to make sure that the policies that are implemented in blockchain are beneficial for everybody in the community, and we do not believe that this is one of those cases.
Thank you. Any questions for? No? Yeah, Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Padilla, thanks for coming to provide testimony. Does ATX DAO plan in the future to have a coin associated with the DAO, or is that in the roadmap?
That is not in the foreseeable future for the roadmap. We believe that tokenization, specifically when it comes to cities, is very fragile. Tokens tend to be extremely volatile, as is the case of city coins, as you may know, Lee. But we believe that it's way too early to start looking at tokenization of cities or tokens for cities, either via DAOs, either via city coins, or whatever. So that is definitely not in the roadmap.
Yeah, I tend to concur with the caution, proceed with caution related to things like this. Austin has a great reputation for being a tech city and attracting a lot of talent and venture capital, and no need to throw a Hail Mary when all you need is a 3rd and 1, running play.
One more thing that I want to add briefly is that projects like these, and specifically the recommendations that you're going to make, are going to be seen by not only civically engaged citizens, but broadly by the population as the way and the sense that the government is taking on blockchain. And if something that is implemented via the recommendations that you make fails, either in the city of Austin, in Dallas, Houston, whatever it may be in the state of Texas, it's going to leave a huge stain in the public's perception of blockchain. And that is extremely risky, because that is going to set a lot of the communities and a lot of the people who are doing a lot of good work back, and set the entire industry back, and make it very hard for blockchain to actually deliver on the promises. So just one advice for caution, one advice for engagement with the community, talking to some of the experts that we have, because again, we want to make sure that the policies that are implemented in Austin and beyond benefit our constituents and our citizens and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm sure. Thank you. Sam, thank you for being here. Appreciate the excellent testimony you've given us here today. What has your advocacy thus far been with the city of Austin directly? Are you reaching out to the council and city manager and mayor and so forth in Austin?
Yeah, absolutely. So
how's that coming along?
Yeah, we very often provide public statement at the city council meetings. We're working with official representatives of the DAO to help us interact directly with a lot more experience in government, to help us interact directly with the city council. So the city council is receptive, and we are in conversations with them specifically about city coins and broadly about blockchain technology and DAOs and whatnot. But I just want to raise these concerns broadly to the state of Texas, and also mention that when it comes to policy, one of the things that this again a different topic, but one of the things that we're looking to implement perhaps in the near future or try to advise on is for DAOs to be recognized as legal entities in the state of Texas. But again, we're here at the state level not only to talk about Austin, but to warn against this type of projects in the broad state, and also to make ourselves available to also work with the state government to advise on legislation that benefits DAOs, benefits Web3, our businesses, our artists, and our communities.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
One last question, Chris.
Apart from the concerns that you're surfacing today, could you give us one or two ideas of what you feel like you need from a legal corporate law perspective in terms of DAOs being legal in Texas? There are a couple of other states obviously working on this, and that's of interest. So if you could just share a few thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's essential for the state to be looking at recognizing DAOs as legal entities, because again, DAOs are a completely new entity. It does not fall easily under a nonprofit. It does not fall easily under the idea of a corporation. But specifically, though, I want to bring the discussion of tokenization to the working group. Again, I think I am at heart, as we would call a crypto bro, and I love crypto, and I do a lot of the things in the space, but I am a conscious crypto bro that it is dangerous to move forward with issues regarding tokenization. There's a lot of volatility in the industry, and I just want to make sure that the legislation that is passed in regards to DAOs specifically, yes, recognize DAOs as legal entities, give us more way to operate freely, but at the same time does not give way for exploits to happen in the legislature and for projects that are not beneficial for the communities to actually take the advantage and start operating in a way that is detrimental to our constituents. Lastly, I just want to mention that there is a lot of work that needs to happen from a grassroots perspective, from the bottom up, and that is exactly what we're doing at ATXDAO, and that's why we really want to make ourselves available to work with all of you, because the changes that are going to happen, the changes that are coming from Web3 come from the bottom up. So to summarize, recognizing DAOs as a legal entity, discussing or making recommendations against tokenizations in the city, and lastly, working closely with local organizations such as, again, ATXDAO, Texas Blockchain Council, and so on.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call the next three witnesses forward. Mitch Klee, Matthew Snow, and Jason Buster.
Mitch Klee was called to do a work call.
Okay. And Matthew Snow, Jason Buster, and Sinica Martyr. I'm so sorry. Sinica Martyr.
Yeah, sorry.
He said. For clarification, will Mitch return?
I'm going to try and see if he can return later, but TBD.
Just wave at me and we'll get him in. Okay.
Yeah. All right, Madam Chairwoman and distinguished members of the committee, thank you so much for having me. My name is Matthew Snow. I'm technically going to speak as an individual since these comments were not pre-approved by my employer, Trammell Venture Partners, a member of the Texas Blockchain Council. I have a lot to say. I'm going to try and squeeze into 3 minutes. If I run out of time, maybe if one of you would be so kind to ask me a question about my recommendations, I could make sure that I don't miss that part. I have a last-minute addition to my notes here. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of confusion in the room today, and it comes down to education. There's a member of MIT in the United States Space Force named Jason Lauer, and he talks about how we use language to describe software, and it's a huge problem. Software is its own language. We're using one language to try and describe terms in another language, and it creates all these complexities. Unfortunately, with all due respect, I would estimate that maybe 80% of the room today does not have a full understanding of some of the technological concepts here. And the risk is targeting the wrong thing as being your enemy and not realizing what your enemy is. Blockchain is a buzzword like Web3 that, with all due respect, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of this broad word we've used to kind of describe a lot of different things. There's two types of chains. There's proof of work and there's proof of stake. Proof of work is the only type of chain that would have enough security assurances to be capable of being something like a global currency. Within a proof of work system, only the chain with the highest hash rate, the easiest ability to audit as a node runner is an individual, and the best cryptographic hashing function standard would matter. That is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is really the signal here. It is freedom money. Bitcoin is Texas's opportunity to lose more than it is any country or state's opportunity to win. And it's what we need to be focusing on. I'm a lifelong, constitutionalist, libertarian, influenced by the Judeo-Christian worldview. My first job was teaching kids in K through 12. I taught kids with special needs. I care deeply about all the issues brought forward today. And I just want to make sure we don't think about the wrong thing. All the threats that people are considering here are really the threats that are going to come from central bank digital currencies if they were to ever be issued by the Federal Reserve and if they were to commandeer the commercial banking system. One of my recommendations, again, as an individual, not sponsored by my employer, is that y'all consider proposing a ban on any central bank issued digital currency within the state of Texas. I think it's absolutely critical for freedom. I'm going to try and quickly run through my story before I run out of time here. There's kind of a unique set of circumstances that brought me here to Texas, here to Austin specifically, and here in the Bitcoin technology sector. I went to undergrad studying entrepreneurship and finance. I worked across a bunch of asset managers, everything from 10 billion to 10 million. And I left a very kind of cushy position actually working for the state government of Massachusetts at their venture capital firm. I had a very clear path to kind of keep getting promoted and retire and spend a lot of time with my family. And I left all that behind to come down here because I think freedom's under attack in this country. All fiat currencies across the world are being debased. And I've spent a few thousand hours researching this subject area and Bitcoin in particular. And through all that, I've come to realize the opportunity that we have to really advance freedom for the world and for Texas specifically. And as I mentioned, if one of you want to ask what my recommendations are, I can squeeze this in.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any questions? Pat?
I'm not going to ask you whether you have anything else to say other than, please answer my question if you
Yes.
don't mind. Do you share the do you share the views expressed in this room so far this morning that the disclosure and subsequent use of sensitive personal data is a serious threat to our liberties and our freedom and all that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think we all have broad consensus there, and that's why I think we just need to be clear about the terms that we're using. The real big threats here are central bank digital currencies and national vaccine passport systems. Those are the two clearest threats to liberty that have emerged in the last 3 years. Massive threat to America and to Texas.
But it's disclosure and redisclosure and use of information about each of us, whether we're K through 12 or older. Do you share that view that it's that broad?
I do, and you can see how insidious it gets. If you have something like, a health passport system, you're basically giving a travel license. So all your prior constitutional rights to free speech, free assembly, and moving around are totally gone. It all depends on who's the issuer, who controls that data. All of this stuff is very questionable. And then with a central bank digital currency, if they were to roll that out, you would lose all autonomy and privacy over all economic transactions, which is more powerful than anything that could ever be unleashed against the American public, because basically a few people in the banking apparatus and kind of deep within the federal government would have all control and all data. And in complete juxtaposition to that, we have an open source protocol secured by a cryptographic hashing function developed by the NSA in 2001, which I believe secures all of our banking system and even our military nuclear apparatus. And it's free and open source technology with a hard supply cap on the currency of 21 million. It's basically a living embodiment of the United States Constitution. It could not be more American, and it could not be more free and voluntary and open source. No one was ever forced to make a Bitcoin transaction on this planet, and we've gotten to $1 trillion market cap in about 10 years. We went from fake internet coins to $1 trillion market cap because this thing works, and it's going to keep working. And if Texas leans in here, I really think Texas can lead the 21st century. Texas will be more powerful than any country on this planet if we lean into this full throttle. And it's really an opportunity. I mean, look at what happened in the last 3 years. I mean, basically the entire American way of life is under attack. We could lose it and we could throw in the towel. Or, it looks like one of our last hopes is for Texas to lead the fight back and kind of maybe make this the strongest and freest country it's ever been in the history of the planet. And it sounds like a lot, but I think that's the opportunity we have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, listen, I just appreciate your testimony. I appreciate you being here. Welcome to Texas.
Thank you.
And we love folks that are liberty-minded coming and being a part of the Texas that we know and love. And so thank you for the feedback. In particular, your concern about vaccine passport and about, obviously, the national digital currency. I share the same concerns, and I will assure you that myself or colleagues that are like-minded will carry legislation to address these topics in the future. So appreciate that very much and your passion and your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Jason Buster?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here and speak to you today. Last 25 years, both as an active duty Air Force officer and as a DoD contractor, I spent in cyberspace operations. Learned two lessons from that. One, there is no such thing as a secure operating system. I'm not going to echo what everybody else has already said. I'll keep my comments very short. I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, as they're known. I believe in competition, but I do not believe in competition for my data. And I believe that there is a lot of competition out there for all of our data. What I would recommend to you to consider for your report to the committee is look at a way to make recommendations, pass legislation, whatever it is, so that each and every single one of us have control of our data. We have control of our children's data. And what I mean by that is there is technology out there, you can do the research on this yourself, that allows us to share information without giving up our private information. And we can verify and validate who we are. We can verify and validate information without actually giving somebody our data. So just like with cryptocurrency, if you don't hold your keys, it's not your crypto, right? If you don't hold your data, it's not your data. Somebody else is holding that. That means they control it, they control you. We're in the data economy now. So it's more important now than ever before that we as an individual, as a sovereign individual, we control all of our data, everything. I don't care whether it's money, health, finances, web surfing, wherever we're looking at, we have the ability to control all of that data and decide how that data is disseminated or not disseminated. And when it comes time to actually verify and validate who we are, we can do that. But part of the problem with this is the centralized databases. We've had numerous data breaches. If you want to stop that, this is what we need to do. Control the data to the individual, and you'll stop that. Now, I've advised senior executives at NASA, all across DoD, flag officers on blockchain. My primary answer to them was, you don't need it. Why not? Because government is inherently centralized. Blockchain is a distributed technology. It's mesh, it's peer-to-peer. So another thing for your consideration is, how is government going to go from being a centralized function to being more distributed and mesh peer-to-peer in order to fully embrace this type of technology, if that's where we really go? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Does anyone have questions or comments? Yeah, Natalie.
Thank you very much for highlighting this critical issue. I just have one brief comment. So technology is a pharmacon. This is an ancient Greek term for a substance that can be used either as a medicine or as a poison, depending on how it is implemented. And the conversation that we've seen in the room today mirrors many of the debates that we've been having for the past half century in the United States about the encroachment of technocratic authoritarianism and the tools that ordinary people can use to protect themselves and their privacy. Few know that the term cypherpunk was actually coined by a housewife in the 1960s who taught herself how to program and became one of the very first hackers. And so I would suggest that when we talk about blockchain, we keep in mind that we're actually talking about an advanced set of cryptographic tools that can protect individuals from the personal data economy, as much as it can be used to accelerate that economy toward truly dystopian ends. I'd love to speak with any of you guys more one-on-one about this afterwards, but I just wanted to thank you again for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Hey.
I'd like to echo my fellow member of the committee about the importance of user control of data, and Mr. Buster, your comments concur with as well. I serve in the Army Reserves and speak and serve in a capacity where I advise Army Futures Command and speak to general officers about this concept. And it is a change of culture to move away from centralized repositories towards decentralized ones. And I think user control of data is important, and perhaps would be a salve to the concerns around data privacy that have been expressed already. Could you provide some more, expound upon the user control components that you referenced earlier around the cryptographic proofs that you were talking about?
Sure. Initially, so I pitched the idea 4 years ago, I guess. And at the time, I was thinking zero knowledge proofs. There's a way that you can verify and validate who you are that way. I'm not convinced that that is the solution now, but I think that further research into that needs to take place before we completely rule it out. But I also understand that there's a need to share data. You have to share data somehow, right? You also have to validate and verify who you are on occasion. There should be a way to do that safely and securely and do it digitally. And if not, then this whole thing goes away. Because if we can't do that, then it's not going to work. I shared with you the one lesson that I learned in 25 years in cyber operations. I didn't share you the second lesson. Second lesson is, this is the dirty little secret, is that you can make an attack look like it came from anywhere, and my 77-year-old mother is responsible. So that's why it is imperative that this committee here come up with solutions and recommendations that make sense, and you have sound, solid research to back it up. So I hope that addresses your question.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Thank you. And next is, I am so sorry. Seneca Mortar?
Martin.
Oh, it's written wrong.
That's just
so
bad
Martin.
penmanship
Okay,
on my
thank
part.
you. Seneca Martin, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for holding this hearing today so that we can be here to testify. I'm going to talk about, first of all, I'm here just representing myself. I do belong to Moms for Liberty in Denton County, Texas, and I am involved in various different parent groups and so forth. I have 3 children that have all been in the Louisville ISD. I also spent 18 years in the aviation industry. And so when we first started talking about this hearing and the discussion of blockchain, I just recalled my experiences in the aviation industry. I started in 2001 before 9/11. And we were a software as a service, SaaS company for aviation industry to help streamline their processes and bring the engineering and maintenance processes, the supply chain processes to a more standardized processes for all carriers globally. So that was a great idea, and in 2001, that's where we were. We were just talking about everybody trying to maintain the same processes. It was about 2008 when blockchain started to come into the to the discussion, and because it went from, we have all these standard processes for repairing a part on an aircraft to purchasing a part for an aircraft or in your offices or for your airline, whatever that may be, into then the blockchain discussion, because you have to, in the aviation industry, which is great, you have to be very, very careful of what you put on your aircraft. So I would take the example as of a thrust reverser on your aircraft. A thrust reverser is a very key component in the aircraft. You can't fly without it. You can't fly without a lot of things on an aircraft, but that's one of the main items. So a thrust reverser is created from the original equipment manufacturer, the OEM, and then it goes and it gets bought and it goes on an aircraft, and then you follow that. Now it has to go through many stages within its life. So it can be taken off the aircraft at various points. It is then repaired or overhauled. It has to go through various testing points. It can only fly for so many cycles or hours within the air before it has to come off the aircraft. All of this has to be documented. So that's when blockchain started to come into the discussion, because it has to be shared. Because this is key. You have to have back to birth records on every single component, down to the coffee maker on an aircraft. Back to birth is key. You need to know where that was made, and you need to know who made it, and you need to know where it was repaired each time, and you need to know who it was owned by, because airlines often sell and or exchange parts between each airlines. American Airlines and Delta Airlines have agreements between each other, and they share parts and components from time to time. They go into pools, all kinds of information. You have to document every single piece of this part. It's back to birth. The documentation is key. And when you don't have that, it gets tossed aside or it gets marked or something, and no one wants to have anything to do with it. So I took all of that and put in a child's name, from thrust reverser to Johnny. You have to have the back to birth records. So if this goes into our school systems and is tracking their transcripts all of their information. You're going to have all of that out there in the world, and it's all going to be accessible, and it's all going to be very, very challenging to change. Part of blockchain and part of blockchain is, and part of the aviation industry is, you don't change that record ever. So these children will have these records that will follow them, and they will never change, and they will never get the opportunity to, it will never stop. It will keep on going because it will follow them forever. It was a little long-winded there, sorry about that, because there's much more, but that's my main concern, is I understand blockchain, and when you put it into a child and you put it into the school systems, it's a snowballing effect to where it's going to go.
Thank you very much for your comments. I have a question, and that is, are you concerned that, so the records that you don't want put on blockchain, are you concerned that they don't exist? Like currently, there are no records that follow your children as they grow in K through 12 education and then go on to college? Or are you concerned that you simply do not want them put in a blockchain? That the blockchain itself, however, to the point earlier about terminology, which we are using that term quite loosely at this point, but you don't want it put into a blockchain protocol of whatever kind, which is the concern, that there are records that follow your child all the way across, and you want those protected in a way that they control, or that it is input into a blockchain of whatever?
There's a bit of a difference when it goes into blockchain, the way that it is used in the marketplace, in the commercial marketplace. So if that translates over to how it would be used in the school system. So as I said, a record is there. It can never be amended. It can never be deleted. It can never be changed. Those records exist today, and they follow my child all the way through, but I can get things taken out of their record as of now. But if it goes into blockchain, you cannot take that out. It follows that child. It stays there forever.
So I'd like to correct this for the record. Technologically, that's not always the case. It depends on the technical architecture of the protocol, and it depends on the governance decisions of the community. So, for example, the 51% attack that was referenced in the MIT article, the whole reason it was a problem is because the community didn't want the protocol changed at that point, but that's what a 51% attack does. It changes the tracking of the transitions in state. That is what a blockchain tracks, right? That's what blockchain protocols do. They tracked transitions in state, right? So I hear your concern is that it's immutable, and to terminology, immutable dictionary definition, that's not what it means in blockchain. In blockchain technology land, immutable means computationally improbable or computationally difficult to change. Not that it can never be changed, and it certainly depends on the technological architecture of whatever protocol is being used. So just to clarify again, is the concern that you could never change it, such that if there were architectures where you had the opportunity with your child to correct data wherever it is held in a database centrally located at the ISD, or in a blockchain-like or distributed ledger-like technological architecture, is that the concern, that you have control over it and you get to appeal for changes to the data? Or is it simply and completely the technological issue of a blockchain protocol? Is my question making sense? I feel like I'm rambling, but that's the question.
There's a few questions in there. So my concern, and historically that has not been the case with blockchain. Historically, and how it started and how we started looking at it in 2008, that is not the case with blockchain, that it would not be changeable, that was the point, because you don't want an aircraft part to be able to be edited at all. So that was the point of implementing blockchain. Okay, so let's take your example or your statement and say that technology is changing, and the point or consensus of how blockchain is going to move forward is changing. I still have great concerns because you still have all of that data. You still have it all in one place. I have all of the concerns that were raised previously of all of the privacy and all of the sharing and third-party entities and so forth, and all of the information that would be out there. My major concerns are that this doesn't stop with just my child's data. Then you start bringing in, will go back to what I know, the aviation. So if I wanted that part and I looked at who repaired it, but I know they have a bad reputation, then I'm going to reject that part, even though you went through all of the proper overhauls and all of the C checks and T checks and whatever that was needed to be done. But I don't like the repair agency. So take that child, and you can start looking as an employer. You can start looking at certain things that they may have done, certain associations that they may have had, certain clubs that they belong to. It would all be there. It would all be there to put out there against or without their consent. That is a major concern, that it's going to be followed. And the big problem is that we can say that it is going to be with their consent all day long. It's as we've talked about before. There are laws in place already to protect my kids from mental health evaluations, but there is a protocol in my child's iPad, an app rather, that is daily checking their mental health. So that's against Texas and federal law. So there's no teeth. There's nobody going backwards and saying, oh, by the way, you can't do that. Even when we go to a school board meeting and tell them that you are violating law, they ignore us.
So to be clear, though, that app on the iPad is not blockchain related, right?
Correct.
So I'm hearing a broader concern. You're free to correct me. I'm hearing a broader concern about data privacy for children specifically, but I've also heard comments from other folks in here, I don't know whether to call you an audience or not, but here, about privacy broadly for children specifically in K through 12, but for everyone broadly. And again, to repeat what we've said repeatedly, your concerns about privacy are not falling on deaf ears, and certainly will be an issue we study.
And it is privacy for sure, and I think you're going to hear it repeatedly, and that is because we want to drive home a point. But also, it's more than it really does start to go to the social credit system. Because then you've got all of their information, you've got all of these people that can access it. If you take a future employee, they have access to your transcript online, they have access to your mental health records, your vaccination records. It all starts to determine, oh, well, really, you tested well in this area, but I want to be an engineer, but you tested well in, HR development or something. So we're going to direct you towards HR. And even though you want to go down to the engineering path, you didn't have the grades for it here or, whatever, and you don't get the opportunity to continue trying. That is where we see this going.
So, ma'am, at this point, I need to be clear in this moment right now. I'm not speaking as the chair of the work group because I can't say that without conferring and voting on something. But I would say personally, I have no interest in recommending any kind of social credit scoring system at all, right? As a person, right? And as a mom, I'm nowhere, wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Okay, so, but again, that's me as a person personally, and as an academic, it's worth, I told myself I wasn't going to tell you all this, but as an academic, I have a big project on privacy and technology in K through 12 schools, particularly in the wake of COVID and the massive change to online learning as a result of that, and it's data-based, gathering information from all across the country, not just in Texas. But so again, just to say, your concerns aren't falling on deaf ears. We hear you.
We appreciate that, and that's why we're here.
And again, while I can't promise anything specifically, we'll be in a report as a personally, I have no interest in a social credit scoring system. Anyone else?
Personally, I agree that we do not have interest in a social credit system, and you do make an excellent point that the provenance of airplane parts it's far different than the provenance of a human being that's made in the image of God. And I I do think that there will be opportunities for us. The discussion shouldn't stop with today. Many of us on this committee would love to engage in dialogue in the coming weeks and months to further flesh some of these things out, because a lot of it is going to take hours-long discussions, and probably don't have time for that today. But let's be sure that we set regular intervals where a group of us can informally gather and have those conversations over Zoom, especially since many of you are traveling from far different parts of the state.
I fully concur with that suggestion. Representative Parker.
Thank you. Seneca, thank you for coming. Just appreciate it very much, making the drive down. And I thought the analogy you gave and talked about your experiences in aviation were really enlightening for me, and I think for members of the panel to think about how the blockchain technology was utilized in that capacity, and gave us a lot to think about. So in terms of where you had something that would truly be a wonderful, life-saving utilization of the technology versus these nefarious things that have been discussed here today as well. So thank you for that very much. It was excellent.
Any final, Pat?
I'm going to ask you a different version of the question I've asked before for your perspective, and it's this. Is there something unique, something specific to this particular form of technology called blockchain, the distributed ledger? Is there something unique about this that makes the legitimate privacy concerns you and others have explained so clearly this morning? What is it about blockchain that's unique to blockchain that exacerbates the problem, that makes it intolerable?
Well, as I said, my experience with blockchain, where we started the discussions, 15 or more years ago, and how we wanted to utilize it, it was great. It was a great idea. We were all excited about blockchain. We felt like it was going to help streamline processes. Documentation was all over the place. It was hard to get those back to birth records. And we wanted to digitize it and make it easily accessible and out there. And when I considered that being implemented into the schools, K through 12 specifically, it became a grave concern. An inanimate object is one thing. My child and their future is a completely different thing.
Agreed. I've heard, or maybe I'm reading into your story, the concern, the fear, the worry that blockchain technology somehow renders data incapable of being corrected or incapable of being deleted when compared to other forms of data sharing, whether it's centralized databases or other methods. My own view, based on 20-plus experience in technology and data privacy and all this, you never really get rid of data.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I can't read.
I wasn't quite finished.
I understand.
I paused while you were reading.
Sorry.
My point was this. If truly a question, to get your reaction to it, I hear the concern that blockchain can render data incapable of being corrected or deleted.
Well, and I actually heard your question, and I understand your question, and I understand technology evolves. I understand that things can be deleted very, very well. I accidentally delete stuff all the time. But we started blockchain discussions in aviation with the intention that, great, here's a technology where you can't change this because it's become digitized, it's across the board, and it's accessible by everyone. Okay, so we've evolved. Are we going to? Are we going to delete things when we say? I can't tell you the trouble that I go through if I have an issue with my child's record and I have to go and ask for that record. I don't get access to it as the parent. I don't have immediate and easy access to it, which to me is an attachment on an email. And then I want it changed. The process is painstakingly, there's forms to fill out, there's things to do. Okay, great. But that is me correcting, for an example, I'll give you a very personal example. My son, who is now 14, in first grade, had an issue with a child, and he got punched by the child. Well, it turned out that my kid hit that child first. So we had to go back to the school and we had to say, well, this had all been documented, put away, and it wasn't until we poked and prodded because we thought something was wrong with his excuse or the way he was telling the story, that we finally got to the truth. So we went back to the school and we said, listen, we know that this other kid has been reprimanded and maybe disciplined, and so we want to put it in for the record. Well, and that wasn't even me trying to take something negative off of my own child's record. That was me trying to input and change a record that had already been done. I think by the end of the year, we got that corrected. Now, they immediately took action with the other family because we were able to talk and we had a good relationship with our principal. But to change just that record was very, very challenging. But it was paper. We could do it. It was in a system. We could print it out. Are we going to go through the effort? Are people going to? We already don't follow our rules and laws that are on the books. I have to go and specifically call out my child and say, my child's the only one at this school right now that sits out when it's time to get in rhythm with the Rhythm Act that is it is emotionally evaluating my child without my consent.
Ma'am, I think you'll find me to be a big supporter of an individual's right to have incorrect data removed or corrected. So I'm not arguing with you on this point, just not. What I'm trying to figure out is...
No, I'm
go
just
ahead,
trying to paint the picture.
Yeah, no, and you've painted it clearly. I'm trying to get my arms around or try to understand better what's unique about blockchain that makes this real life legitimate problem worse. I can't find it yet because I don't believe we
Well, I think we've indicated several times that the problem may be with the fact that we aren't even following laws that are on the books, and now we want to pile on top of it.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to move to the next set of speakers, so apologies in advance. John Pugh, Eric Reeves.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, am I still supposed to wait for that one?
No.
Eric Reeves and Mariana Porter.
Mariana's leaving with Seneca because they got to get back because we drove really far. So you want to go first right now, Mariana? Yeah, good. Okay. Sorry, a whole bunch of us drove in from long ways.
We're happy to make sure that you have the opportunity to speak. Please go first.
My name is Mariana Porter, and I'm Texas resident for 17 years. And
I'm sorry, could you bring the microphone closer to you? Yeah, just bend it, there you go.
As you probably could figure out that I'm not really a public speaker. It's probably my first experience of public speaking. So I've been a little bit nervous, and I don't really know what I can add to all these testimonies that already been done before me. But I'm here, so I'm gonna testify anyway, give my opinion, I guess, anyway. So, yes, my kids, I'm gonna testify just from my personal experience, and my kids have been with Louisville ISD, actually, Flower Mounds High School, for 14 years, public schools. And I'm expressing my concern about blockchain technology being used in public schools when it comes to keeping kids' public school records. So when I was getting ready for this testimony, I kind of, at the beginning, I thought about using my kids' personal example. And then I happened to stumble upon an article in the Dallas Morning News from May 14th of this year. The headline of this article said, "Keller teen makes U.S. history as youngest Black female law grad. So this article was about 19-year-old girl who just graduated from SMU Dedman School of Law. Impressive, right? I don't know, maybe somebody already familiar with this article, but it's really, just jumped at me.
She was a student of mine.
Really amazing, I started to read the article, and right there in the first two paragraphs, there was example for me to use at this meeting. And I'm gonna quote here. In 5th grade, Haley Taylor Schlitt's usually high grades began to slip. Suspecting she was bored, her parents met with her teacher and school principal to ask about placing her in the gifted and talented program or giving her more advanced work. They were told at that time her test scores were too low to make that happen. Frustrated and disappointed, her parents pulled her from public school and began homeschooling. The rest was a history. So when that girl was in 5th grade, some teacher and administrator made a mistake that almost derailed her future. If we had blockchain technology implemented in Haley's elementary school at that time, her record would carry that stain of not high enough score for gifted and talented placement for the rest of her life. And I'm concerned about actually what gentleman mentioned, the permanence of this record when it applies to permanence of this technology when it applies to public school record or any school records. So the nature of blockchain technology makes it almost impossible to change anything in blockchain-based records, including previously made mistakes. And as we heard from this example, teacher and administrator made a mistake. So I just wanted to use this example. On another hand, if I have a couple minutes, or not even a couple minutes, I guess no, I don't have a couple minutes, so I'm gonna leave you at that.
I'm actually gonna take my chair's prerogative and ask you to continue for a minute, please.
Oh, thank you so much. Just on another hand, the object of this technology, of blockchain technology, when we talk about K through 12, is not something unchangeable. Kids do change. They make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and move forward to the next mistake. At least mine do. That's how many of them learn, by trying and sometimes failing. So why would we want to punish them by permanently marking their record with every mistake that they ever made? So like I said, I just wanted to express my concern about permanent nature of blockchain technology when it applies, when it's applied to school records.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Parker.
I was just going to thank you for coming. You did a great job testifying, and so thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I think the analogy and the story that you described was an excellent one, and how this incredible phenom, who's obviously the chair student at SMU Law School, graduated at 19 with a law degree, would not have had that, to your point, if those test scores in 5th grade would have held her back and been a part of that permanent record that would have held her back. So appreciate that very much, and it's certainly something to take away for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Natalie, we have one more question. Natalie?
Yes, thank you so much for your testimony, and I fully agree with what you've said. I did want to comment briefly on the question of immutability, because I think that's really what's been coming up again and again with regards to blockchain technology. Blockchain, is defined in many places as an immutable ledger. And so even if in principle there are forms of architecture that can be edited, at that point, the question may rightly be asked, why use a blockchain in the first place and not simply a digital database, which is editable by definition? Because of the immutability of many blockchain architectures, one of the key design principles for people working in blockchain-based digital identity is never to encode any plain text data on chain. So this is a misconception that I wanted to just take a moment to dispel. Like when when we talk about, how best to use blockchain for verification of identity records, that does not mean actually putting those records on a blockchain. What it means instead is generally using a set of one-way cryptographic functions that would enable someone to verify your identity. Like, let's say you were selling your car, and you wanted to verify the identity of the person buying it. You could do that, but their identity isn't actually on the chain. And that identity document can be revoked. It can also be edited, and older versions of it can be expired and deleted. And so this is the design challenge, the frontier, when we talk about digital identity. Identity is becoming more and more digital, and so far, it's been the Wild West. Like, there is a basically no holds barred personal data economy that's exploited by both private industry and government to surveil ordinary people. And the only long-term defense against that, from my point of view, is advanced cryptography, using very specific types of blockchain architectures. But most blockchain architectures don't fall in that category. This is my personal point of view and not the point of view of the committee, but I just wanted to share that with you because the immutability concern is very real, and there are technical safeguards and precautions that are being put in place now to prevent that from being an issue.
You definitely sound much more knowledgeable and experienced than I am in blockchain technology and cryptography. I just want to say that your explanation just inspire me basically to go back and learn more about this technology, because everything I know about blockchain is applicable to crypto and cryptocurrency and then bitcoins. So I didn't know about use of this technology in record keeping, especially in public schools, and especially because, like a lot of you mentioned, a lot of unintended consequences, and then we should be, and I think that not just we should be aware of that everybody on this panel is pretty much aware of that any good technology can be used for good, or it can be used for something not so good, and sometimes it's not even intended to be used, for disadvantage for to harm humankind. But unfortunately, it's just, people find a way to use it this way. So just, sorry.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. So thank you.
John Pugh.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can you restart me? I'm timed. If I can get in here. Well, my name is John Pugh, and I work as a fraud investigator for a company called BioSig that neutralizes national and international crime rings, specifically in the area of identity fraud. Our company is inside Representative Parker's district, and oddly enough, the state of Texas is our largest shareholder. Madam Chair Reyes and Vice Chair Parker, right now, sophisticated criminal syndicates and national state actors are targeting two of the biggest piggy banks for financial student aid dollars, both California and Texas respectively. And they do this through their application portal websites. In 2019 and 2020, California dispersed $13.7 billion in financial student aid, the largest amount in the nation, with Texas being number two, dispersing $9.64 billion via the Go Apply Texas website, Higher Education Coordinating Board. Let that sink in a little bit. That's $10 billion flowing, in essence, in and around a single website in a school year, and that's pre-COVID numbers. In the summer of 2021, the California side, CCC Apply website was attacked with at least 65,000 bots that appear like real students. And what that does is it allows the criminals to steal the financial aid dollars without ever even having to show themselves in person, especially during COVID. This, of course, is Elon Musk's number one focus on the Twitter purchase, Twitter's represented that the number of fraudulent accounts in their system are in fact bots is no larger than 5%. Elon and many other outside experts put that rate much higher, maybe even closer to 20%. So we have 2 points for the working group. Number one, nobody knows really how many bots are out there right now currently in our colleges and universities, and they won't know unless there's some type of really legitimate audit. And second, in relative terms, that it is ridiculously simple right now to prevent the kind of attack that happened in California from going forward. It's just not a technical problem anymore. At the federal level, CISA advises when these types of attacks occur to assume that you've been compromised and then to go threat hunting. And yet, another advisement of CISA is obviously to no longer rely, certainly with such gigantic dollar amounts on the line, on single-factor authentication. In our dialogue with the Department of Education Office of Inspector General, we've learned that the cornerstone of fighting financial student aid fraud is the ability to establish the provenance of a student that's graduated high school. If you haven't graduated high school, you're not eligible for financial aid funds. Blockchain-anchored digital transcripts are perfectly suited to do this. This is no longer a technical problem like it may have been thought of in the past. Our product's been around for 10 years. We're proven and stable. 30 seconds to continue the last paragraph. The problem seems now one of moral hazard where colleges and universities really aren't penalized for leaving them around or not investigating very hard how many they have, and perversely, accidentally, they're incented to leave them there, as is with the Twitter situation. The education dollars we have are simply too precious to be handed over and serve as giant dark pools of slush funds for Lord knows who and for what nefarious purpose. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. And we're doing it in a magnitude that's measured in billions. We're working with public-private groups and advisors to come up with a vendor-neutral solution approach which stops the looting and keeps the appropriations for the colleges and students that need them. That's it, and I'd love it if you asked a question about privacy or any of those things, just from the other side of the same coin.
Thank you. Anyone want to ask the question?
John, thank you for being here, and I've enjoyed our conversations the last couple of years on these topics, and maybe just enlighten the folks that are watching remotely, those of us here in the room, about, I know you talked about an agnostic, so to speak, vendor agnostic solution, but can you just kind of comment on that a little bit more detail about how you solve this problem so we don't have a problem?
Sure, and that's the reason
like
we
you
went
saw
to TAN.
in California ever occur?
Yes, sir. That's the reason we went to TAN, because we were just like, this is nuts. We lost billions of dollars in our little company, and relative to the heavyweights that are in and around us in this room, we are relatively small. But we have, and what the state of Texas invested in is, it's called biometric, but it's an ID, but it's really a gesture-based biometric. And all that means is that instead of typing in a password, you draw it. And so if you knew that my password was mom, and I showed you the way I drawed mom, you couldn't get in because you can't draw mom exactly the way I do. At a machine learning level, it learns that. So in terms of privacy, what's to steal? The way I draw? You gonna sell that on the dark net? No, it's worthless. So we have something that's really easy to push down to K-12 that we use all the time in higher ed. The hook that the OIG told us that we need that's so vital, it's that pivotal transfer of a legitimate student over to the college and then from a college to a university. And we thought that the blockchain anchored student records, and the OIG did, are perfect for that. I've been surprised about the concerns of privacy and other things. I didn't, in fact, I had a hard time understanding what those were. I'm a father of liberty, and I am very fluent I speak Patriot. And so I share we're on the same team. And what all we understand is the very minimum of information. Right now, it's coming over stolen from people that steal it already. It's already insecure and it's already out there. You can get into any system, especially learning management systems and student information systems. But rather than let the criminals send it over, and steal billions for things that would really make the moms mad, political slush funds, California, other places. We could have an organized, controlled handing over of the basis for financial student aid, and then with our little biometric, or any companies, we're vendor neutral, truly. We just need to deal with the problem. We just check them along the way. Are you you? Are you you? Are you you? And they go doop, doop, doop with their password, and yeah, it's me. And that in and of itself would solve 99% of it. And we don't have to, this technology hasn't been there in long past. You know, we've had Pell runners and financial aid theft for years. But this committee has an opportunity to stop $6 billion worth of fraud for the state of Texas and for the students and the colleges that need it. And so that's a great thing that could be done with this technology, provided that you deal with these thorny issues that you've been addressing. And I am cautiously optimistic that that could be done.
Very good. Thank you, John.
Anyone else? Yeah, Chris.
I have a little bit of a technical question. So I absolutely understand biometric, machine learning, studying the pattern of the way someone would draw their own name. Totally get it. I'm lost on the connection to blockchain in any way, because that can exist, completely separate. So
yes.
I lost the script on that somehow.
Yeah, it's the blockchain anchored transcripts used in conjunction with a multi-factor, and it is biometric because it's gestured, but it doesn't look or feel like it. There's no fingernails or thumbprints. But it's the two used in conjunction would provide a suite that would provide an early warning system for financial student aid fraud. So the whole basis of it is we've got to get that original high school student over to a college. Right now, what they did in California is they flooded the single system that touched all their colleges with a ton of bots. And that's fake information. And unfortunately, many colleges, certainly now that they're under financial pressure with low enrollments, those checks don't really get done. The transcript checks don't get done.
So just so I'm clear, is it your point of view that without the connectivity to a blockchain, that the system doesn't function effectively?
Well, I can. In fact, I would love to meet with you outside of this, and we can provide you a gazillion articles that we're getting stolen blind. Massively blind. Like the only other worst case of CARES fraud money right now is the unemployment fraud money. Number two, financial student aid. And that goes, nobody knows. I mean, it's not that nobody knows, it's just it goes unspoken because it's usually the taxpayer that pays. The schools get their money. But billions are being stolen, billions, if we just leave things the way they are. It's worth looking at and at least considering. I think that's the purpose of this group, and perhaps you put it in the report as worth investigating further, that perhaps there's a way to get that provenance of the student set up and sent over to a college, which is the cornerstone for financial student aid fraud. And then with the use of a multi-factor authentication like ours at the front door of the Go Apply Texas website, that's it. They're done. They can't get in. We know that because we go undercover sometimes on the dark web and we ask them to. And in ours, they can't. You'd have to have a real person there applying with a real identity in order to do it. If the bot issue goes away, and so does so much of the historical financial student.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Eric Reeves. Is that you? Good.
My name is Eric Reeves. I'm the General Counsel and Chief Data Trust Officer for Greenlight Credentials. So as such, I'm probably the most popular person in the room right now. And I want everybody to know that I completely share the concerns around privacy that have been addressed and set forward today. I think we all agree that our children's privacy should be protected. I came down here at the invitation of John to speak about his idea about combining biometric signatures with blockchain education records, and how the combination of those two things would be kind of like a belt and suspenders anti-fraud and security provision. I like the idea. The invitation to come down here today, I didn't intend to talk about Greenlight at all. Matter of fact, I wasn't even planning on using the name until a couple of speakers brought our name forward. So to pivot into a green light discussion real quick. A few years ago, some leaders in Dallas, at Dallas College and Dallas ISD, set forth a vision to create a records management system designed to empower students and parents and to reduce the administrative burden associated with records requests. That vision is now a reality and represents one of the largest educational blockchain record solutions anywhere in the country. There's a great statement that says about minefields. It's the worst to be the first person in the minefield, and it's always best to be the last person out of the minefield. And in this instance, we're the first in. We have been working with great resources across our state. The Communities Foundation, which runs Educate Texas, the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation here, and the American Council on Education, representing 2,000 universities across the country. I've spent many hours in front of the U.S. Department of Education's Privacy Task Force Committee. And, so we're doing our work. I want to address 3 or 4 really important points to address some of the points that have been made here. Greenlight never shares personal identifying information with third parties. We're held to the exact same standards as student information systems and learning management systems. And I might add to the juxtaposition that you've been making, the databases with student information systems and learning management systems have infinitely more data than what we're touching in terms of the transcript. And we're held to the same standard as those companies. Our privacy policy, which is our promise to our students and our parents, meets and exceeds FERPA and the California Data Privacy Act. Now, the California Data Privacy Act might be something that this state should consider. We operate at that standard. It's an imperfect law, as most are, but it is a very good attempt to create more power in terms of an individual, whether you're a student or a parent, to have control over your records. And at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, is empower students and parents to have more control over their records than exists today. And I'll give you a last example. My 20-year-old just went through the college application process. She took the SAT. College Board sold all of her information to every single university across the country. We were flooded with all sorts of interesting pieces of, solicitations. Yes. And so it's just my way of saying we don't do what College Board does. This is, a totally separate thing. And the student controls at all times where their records go. And we can audit it, which is one of the beautiful parts about the blockchain, is we know and can trace where the records go. So you can look at it as a parent, as a student, or as an administrator in a school system. So with that, I'll take questions. I'm happy to work with anybody, including all the folks here, to address issues that have been put forward.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Reeves, in the Greenlight system, does the parent and student own the data, or who owns the data, I guess, is a better question.
I had a lengthy conversation with Mary, right? Mary, about that this morning. And I'll address this to our lawyer in the room. Okay, good. I'll address this to the lawyers in the room. FERPA is kind of the controlling statute that handles a lot of this stuff. It is a gray area of who owns the records. And I can tell you right now, Greenlight does not own the records. Our position is that the student and the parents own the records. If you did the work at school, you should own your records. But that's not how FERPA sees it, and that's not how K-12 sees it, and that's not how universities see it. They view those records as their records. You know, we can talk to a registrar at SMU, we can talk to the registrars at Dallas ISD. They view those as their records. So, you know, that's another part of this that we may want to consider looking at in terms of a committee or a legislature or as a governmental body is really who really does own these records. Our position is that the student and the parents should own their records.
And I have one clarifying question around FERPA. So earlier it was commented that in order to use the green light system, they had to sign something that required waiver of all FERPA rights. And I was just wondering whether you could comment on whether there is a FERPA, broad FERPA waiver in your terms of service or not.
There is not. As a matter of fact, we have FERPA conditions in our agreements and our contracts. Now, I'm not sure what that was related to, but I can say that the specific case that this lady, can't remember, Jamie, that Jamie brought up indicates to me that our system is working because the student got notice, there was a notice delivered, and they had to take, there's a process in which a student takes control over their records. You have to have it's a two-factor authentication, essentially. So we address FERPA. We're bound by FERPA. There's no FERPA waiver contained in it whatsoever.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
I didn't take your, I'm sorry.
So to be clear, at this point, the members of the committee are asking the question. Any other questions from, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. So your comment a moment ago that this gray area is over the ownership of data, that your perspective as an organization is that it should be owned by parents and the child versus the ISD or a university. How would you implement getting that done? What would your perspective be on how we should best, from a legislative perspective, address that to make certain that the ownership of that data was clearly residing with the individual, with the parent and the child, as opposed to the institution?
Well, you have, there are a lot of legislation on what goes into a transcript or what is a transcript. And that's something that y'all may want to take a look at too, is so for instance, with the school district over here, they implemented the student record as it exists and is defined by the state of Texas and made it available via blockchain. So that's what we do. Within that legislation or within that law, you could write in the ownership part of it. It could be, I'm not saying it's simple, but, and there are considerations, and there probably are some legitimate rights of the institution, but I think those legitimate rights should be balanced off against, if the student does their work, you get your, you walk across the stage and you get your diploma. At that point, you should own your educational record, as opposed to having to always go back to the registrar and beg for them. We've got numbers of stories of people, they're applying for jobs in Dallas, and, they can't get their records out of, heaven forbid, they've got a job opportunity and they have to get their records together over spring break, because you have to go in, I can send you money right now with my phone. Why shouldn't I be able to send you my academic records via my phone if I need them for a legitimate purpose and I'm doing it? I'm sharing my records with you for a purpose. And so that's why that part of the transcripting legislation I think should be augmented.
And just to follow up, so we have obviously a witness that provided testimony earlier that talked about the difficulty that she experienced or that her child experienced, that there was no approval sought, so to speak, with a minor child. Can you address what could have gone wrong, so to speak, with your technology, why that would have occurred? Is that the individual school district misapplying your technology? Can you just better explain that for everyone to understand what could go wrong and perhaps in this case what happened?
Because I don't know the exact situation, it's hard for me to address that one directly. But let me tell you how it's supposed to work. I mentioned earlier that there are thousands of systems working in school districts. All of them require parental consent. Especially if they're dealing with records of children below the age of 13. You got lots of reasons to have parental consent there. So any company or any nonprofit that is a third party to a school district or a college, there is a requirement that whoever is engaging with the system has to have consent to do it. And that's what we do here. Is not only is there supposed to be a parental consent mechanism in place. So, if you go through our privacy laws and our terms of use, it says if you don't have parental consent, you cannot use this system.
And just, I'm sorry, just one more follow-up question. Along those lines, in that scenario where you have something that arbitrarily went wrong, so to speak, from your perspective, and parental sign-off was not obtained, what should the recourse be in your organization's assessment to the parent, to the child, to the family, when something like that would occur? What should the recourse look like, and
well, our contract
what would
document,
you construct that to look like?
I'm sorry to speak over you. Our contract document is directly with the school district or a college, and so you have to. A parent would need to go directly to the school district, and then the district would tell us, okay, Johnny or Eric doesn't have parental consent to utilize the system, so then we shut all that off.
So, Representative Parker, I would just like to say this is, again, so separately in my academic hat, this is an area of research for me, and then separately as a mom, this is an area of concern for me. So as you've described, parental consent comes via the school district. And so if you want to withdraw your consent, then you have to, in my experience, I have had to withdraw my consent for everything. And so the response was, oh, you don't want to use this specific thing? Well, can't be in the yearbook either. Have fun explaining that to your kid, because we can't take pictures of them then, right? Because it's like a blanket privacy consent, right? So I think some of the concern you're hearing in the room, and something that we would take under advisement for our deliberations and for the report, is the nature of consent, right? And this is actually from an academic perspective, and this has nothing to do with your company, or like from an academic perspective, this is a exceedingly popular topic in privacy law and for privacy academics. The idea that consent isn't something that's easily given for reals when you're dealing with online generally, but then in this context, because of the way it's set up with school districts and with schools, at least in my experience, and that's as personally as a mom, it was, you want to withdraw your consent for this thing, which to be clear was I didn't want my kids' pictures being taken by their teachers and put on Twitter, because I don't put my children's faces on social media. But in order to prevent that from being done without my consent, I had to withdraw consent from everything. Yeah. My kids aren't in the yearbook. They're not in the end of the day pictures for their classes, right? So I think what we're hearing generally is a concern about what is meaningful consent. And to be honest, although we hear you, what I'm trying to say is this is like one of the biggest legal issues for everyone everywhere in an online age, and I'm not so certain it's within like this group's power to fix it all. But we certainly are hearing you, and it would be something we will certainly deliberate on. And also, to be clear and to be fair to Representative from Greenlight here, Mr. Reeves, like that piece of it is entirely outside of his control, right? That's like part of the broader legal system that is an issue everywhere. And if you're interested in these issues, there's a great book called Owned by Josh Fairfield, who's a professor at Washington and Lee, which discusses more broadly the issue for privacy law. I forget what the rest is, like Owned : subtitle something. But anyway, he digs into it from like a broader academic perspective. Okay.
I'm sure one more question or so, if you don't mind, Mr. Reeves. So appreciate everything you shared with us already so far. Just following up on that comment, I guess, or the question I had with regard to recourse, so to speak. I understand that's with the school district that you were describing, but can you speak just broadly in high-level terms in terms of whether or not a recourse availability exists contractually between your organization and those various governmental entities that you're working with? Can you just?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, because this is a relatively new area, or let's just say this is a relatively new application of a technology. Some of the issues are the same everywhere, whether it's a student information system or a learning management system. But the contracts that we've been entering into, because this is a relatively new space, are heavily negotiated. I've been working in the K-12 space for 20 some odd years, and I've rarely ever had to sit down with a lawyer, to get a contract done. I mean, usually it's just done by the purchasing officer, and you check the boxes and you're done. That's the way most contracts are done. There's a template form.
Sure.
And you abide by all the terms and conditions and warranties that, they're mostly traced back to legislation. In this instance, almost every single one I've had to deal with a lawyer on the other side, and we go through all of the terms and conditions and make sure that there's belts and suspenders, and that's that's in their interest too. And we want to help them operate. Frankly, we want everybody to operate at a higher standard with regard to data. And because of the blockchain nature of the work that we do, we've actually found, and I'm not going to call out names, but we've had to identify data problems or data inconsistency problems that school districts have in terms of the quality of their data. And fascinatingly enough, that data is being sent to Austin, on a regular basis via T-Rex, which is a aptly named system because it's a dinosaur. And I'm telling you, not secure, but that's the system that we use. It's antiquated. So the data that's being sent from many school districts via T-Rex to the TEA to be housed in their servers have a lot of irregularities about them. And it's a very uncomfortable position to be in when you're hired to do this work, which was this is a discrete service. I mean, discrete meaning it's just to help students do college applications, scholarships, internships, jobs. So very limited purposes here in terms of the use of the data. So that's the challenge that we face, is we have these other systems out there and we've got this new system, and so we're having to operate at a higher standard, and we're pushing them to operate at higher standards, and they're pushing us to operate at higher standards.
Thank you. My final question is this on the topic for now. I was concerned with what the chair shared a moment ago about her own story or experience with her child, and that she wanted to opt out of some of these matters, privacy concerns specific to some of these applications, but in the end, her child was punished for being effectively in the yearbook. That seems absurd to me, and something that needs to be clearly corrected. So is that an individual ISD policy that was allowed to occur, that she couldn't opt out of these issues pertaining to real meaningful protections for the child versus something that's a fun keepsake to finish your school year?
I'm with the chair that this is a deep and tortured subject in our country. So we're kind of getting a field from it, and the chair and I are exactly alike. I have a 10-year-old. No, we do the same thing. We've opted out of everything. Our poor child is like, not to be seen here, because we're just concerned about utilization of images, whatnot, and it's a kind of a dangerous place we live in. So the management system for consents, I'd love to get into that business. If the state of Texas got really, and I would say state of Texas, any jurisdiction in our country should be investing in a consent mechanism management system. They don't exist right now. So what happens is, what happened to this lady right here is, they probably went to, the first night of school. They sit down with the packet. The principal gets up and says, "This is what we're doing. It's going to be a great year. Everything's going to be fantastic. By the way, you've got your package of information. Sign the bottom, and your child can do sports, can do all the stuff, the extracurricular stuff and whatnot." And buried in that consent is your student has we consent to use the student information system that we've selected. We're going to use the learning management system. A lot of people use Schoology, just to use an example. So all of those consents are often just a one signature, no thought, nothing, and so then from a legal perspective, you say, is there really consent here? It's like, it's kind of like highway robbery in a way. It's just,
I would argue there's not, right? It's not legitimate consent.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
But that's the world that we're living in.
Sure.
I can't solve that. I would love to. I have to rely upon the district to tell me that there is consent or not consent. And if there is not consent, our promise is no utilization of the services.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so briefly, you actually had two more questions, but we're going to keep the questions brief, and we're going to keep the answers brief.
I'll try.
Thanks.
Some of this has been covered. I'm a native Texan, grew up here, tried to get A's and B's on my paper report card. Conduct, sometimes there was a needs improvement, but little concerned about how, and you're right, this is much broader than even Texas. I'm curious, why are some of these systems that are really meant to kind of drive some sort of technological-based efficiency an opt-in system versus being in this onerous position of, okay, well, you're the one child that's opted out, and it feels punitive. Like that kind of, I wouldn't personally want my records by de facto, and then I've got to go through some process to get it out. That seems like a pretty blunt. I'm just kind of curious, are there discussions with these school boards or whatever it might be, whoever the actual customer is here, around that particular issue, opt-in versus opt-out, and then you're the kid that's not able to have fun with his friends and be in the yearbook? That's just sad.
Well, in our situation, we kind of try to do a two-level deal here. Is we rely upon the district to tell us that there's consent. So that's one thing. And then we have, what happened to this lady's child, which is a notification goes to the child and then says, here is how you access your records. So if you get the notice, let's just say you have consent and you get the notice and you don't want to do this, then you don't have to do it. So this is a real, you have the consent. but then you have to take a positive step, to go through the door to access your records. And if you don't, then you don't. The records are not there until the student takes them. You have to walk through the door and then the records come to you.
Lee.
Just a quick question about the data that is in the records. Obviously, the ISD has a lot of information on these children, and it sounds like you're saying that there's less in your system. It's looking like here that there's lots of, so curious, date of birth, the child's pronoun, a couple other pieces of information on a screenshot that we see here that I can't quite see all of it. How much of that is just like in the sign up, and how much of that is information that you're pulling from the ISD?
It's all coming from the ISD or the college. We don't deal with any data that's not related to the transcript. So if you look at the legislation that defines what the transcript is, those are the data codes that we interact with in terms of the student information system and pulling the information out or getting the information pushed, however it's done. So it's all the data that we're dealing with is dictated by state law.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next three on the list are Rhonda Hurst, Regina Engel, and Fran Rhodes. And again, if you did not fill out a witness card and you're sitting in the room and you hope to sit at that table and speak, please fill out a witness card. They're in the back on the table and provided to the clerk.
I'm just going to reiterate, the first beep is you have 30 seconds remaining and the yellow light turns on. The second beep is your time has expired. The third angry beep is you're 30 seconds over and try to wrap up quickly and efficiently.
And if that doesn't work, I'll be waving a fist at you, which means to stop. So the three again, maybe people have left already, but to make sure, Rhonda Hurst, Regina Engel, and Fran Rhodes. Oh, I caught one.
I saw Regina step out.
Regina stepped out, okay. So then I'm gonna come back to her then, but so could we have, is Mitch Klee back in the room yet? No. Okay, and then Jennifer Williams. Okay. So Pierce, if you could just note, we're gonna come back to Regina Engel. Just put it, okay. Rhonda Hurst.
I'm Rhonda Hurst. Tan told us about this. I've lived in Texas for most of my life. I'm an engineer and a mom. I'm very, the gentleman that spoke about green light, that's wonderful, but that's not what his website says, and that's not what happens. And if you are in the Dallas Promise program, you have to join it. You don't have a choice. They have a captive audience of public school children, and they get paid for this. And consent in the Louisville ISD, you know what that is? You sign a form saying I'm taking the iPad, and into Louisville ISD, you've consented to all of it. You've consented to illegal psychological assessments. You've consented to your child being data mined for everything. And this is in order to get your records from Louisville, you have to do a public information request. If they exist. If they exist, they'll give them to you. But you know they exist because you've seen them, but then they tell you they don't exist. But we know they exist. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on in the public schools. But I'm here to say a digital lock, there should be no digital identity tied to anybody. The parents, control is not ownership. It's ownership, not control. And we don't want our stuff in your system to begin with. So when the gentleman says, oh, we have to walk through the door to get access to it, we all know by talking to the people on the ground, it's already been uploaded. So it just means you don't access it, but they have it. It's true. It's parent after parent after parent. And you can audit, if they can audit the data, that means they can see it. And we don't do unidentifiable markers. A college computer engineer can put together unidentifiable markers and figure out who the heck it is. Yeah, we hear it all the time. And even their own website says, everything you can put in here. You can put your vaccinations, your medical info, school records, everything, because you know what? We're too lazy to carry around our stuff. Read their website. The marketing is, well, this is just so much easier, So stop telling, this is what's happening with parent after parent after parent. So the private companies that have direct ties to the government, because the ancestral relationships between these digital companies and the state are incredible. You got to stop hiring your friends because we're noticing. And you're getting big, fat, taxpayer-funded fees for a captive audience that can't say no. These companies will use your children for commodities for data mining, and your life will never be forgotten. It also sets up for digital twinning, which are virtual selves on blockchain. This technology has been used in China, we know, for their social credit system. It was used as the IBM Hyperledger fabric in Europe for vaccine passports. This is being used to harness and track our kids. It's being rolled out in our health records. You're getting you're giving yourself as a free commodity to profit big tech and government, and you're giving away your constitutional rights. We're not car parts. We're not produce. We're America. We're a constitutional republic with God-given rights that shall not be infringed on. Mama bears like me are going to fight to make sure it stays that way. The graphic I gave you is from the World Economic Forum. It shows exactly what they want to do. And my experience with blockchain is, as an engineer, blockchain is coming to where I work. The blockchain system that's about to be delivered fully functional will double the revenue of the electric company. I've talked to them. We've been on the ground. The problem is they're selling it as it's undeletable. So you do something stupid in high school, colleges, they're not going to ask you. Even Greenlight says you don't even have to apply for colleges anymore. They'll find you. So that means that the colleges have license to do their own social credit system. So I get that it sounds all rainbows and unicorns, but talk to the parents after parent who the school districts are no help. We have no recourse. We're parents. We don't have lawyers. We don't have money. They know that. They string us out. Oh, you have to do a Title I complaint, Title II, So 6 months later, the problem's irrelevant. My kids aren't on, we don't have social media. My kids they're in a low-tech school. I'm raising them like the 80s, and every single one of their teachers know it. Because what's happening has been verified by our school district leaders. That's why we're here. And because blockchain's being sold as a next big gadget, and Mike Morath is in bed with the blockchain people who want to use public children's school as a captive audience, that's why we're here talking about it. Because it's so incestual that Mike Morath's people are the ones getting the money. Well, heck, I wish I was his friend. I'll make a company. That's what we're seeing. And I'm sorry, I've been steeped in this stuff for a month now, but I hear all this, but that's why we're here. And you're hearing it over and over, but every day we're getting shut down. Sorry.
Thank you. Any questions? To be clear, I don't hire anybody.
I know.
It's me. Okay. No questions or comments?
I'll just comment. Rhonda, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your passion and the testimony. I think it was very good for the members, for all of us to hear your thoughts and comments on everything that you covered. And so I just appreciate you coming down to Austin and sharing your feedback, as I do everyone that's provided their testimony today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I echo Representative Parker's comments. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you for your passion. Don't apologize for it. Thank you. Fran Rhodes.
Hi, my name is Fran Rhodes. I am president of True Texas Project, and I am here representing myself and True Texas Project. I was very recently made aware of this blockchain thing, and frankly, I struggle to understand it. I am not a complete Luddite, but I'm an old grandmother, and some of these things are very new and foreign to me. I asked a lot of questions from a lot of people and got lots of different answers. It kind of sounds to me like something out of a dystopian novel, to be frank. But that's probably has to do with my age. But the one thing that keeps coming up as I talk to people about it are things like what Ms. Rhonda just said. A very deep concern for privacy, for the rights of students in public education, as well as college students. I don't think I have anything to say today that hasn't already been said by other moms and grandmothers in this room. But I urge you as a group, you are going to be making recommendations to the legislature. That's what you are tasked to do by October, I believe is the date. So I'm going to urge you to be very, very careful about how this technology is used in public education. I don't have kids in school anymore, and my grandkids go to private school. But if I did have school-age children right now, there is no way I would enroll them in a public school in Texas. I just wouldn't do it. And this is one of many, many reasons for that. I think that it's a very slippery slope and that we need to proceed carefully. I'm not naive enough to think that blockchain technology is not going to be there somehow. Obviously, it is. But we need to protect our children and our families. And so I respectfully request that you recommend that this not be used in public education, and also that you recommend to the legislature that laws need to be passed to prevent it, not just recommend, but put things in place to prevent things happening like what you've heard from parents today that are happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone have questions? Thank you very much for your time and for keeping it to time.
I'm Jennifer Williams. I'm a mom of 3. According to international reports, governments and public sector organizations leverage blockchain technology to move away from soiled and inefficient centralized systems. Current systems are inherently insecure and costly, while blockchain networks offer more secure, agile, and cost-effective structures. But at what cost? The United States Constitution was written to protect our God-given freedoms. The 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees each and every child in this nation the right to a free and appropriate public education. Nowhere in the United States Constitution does it state that upon enrolling my child in a public institution that I provide informed consent, uninformed consent, or implied consent for the government, any government institutions, or any government employees to make decisions for me on behalf of my children or without me on behalf of my children. In the course of my research on blockchain technology, I've learned that our children's data is worth big money and it's being sold to the highest bidder. And prior to 3 months ago, I learned it was being sold without my consent and or knowledge. In 2018, the TEA and State Board of Education adopted a new long-range plan for public education. This plan established goals through the year 2030, including equity and access and student engagement and empowerment, among others. Equity is an interesting word as most people confuse it with equality. However, in modern social sciences, this term actually refers to the practice of providing more resources to certain populations deemed privileged while providing fewer resources to those populations viewed as privileged, with the promise of having an equal outcome. This belief is already hurting students in Texas schools as all classes are forced to take the STAR practice exams multiple times. Also, few students don't have to take summer school to catch up. But there is no promise of advanced courses for those students that are excelling and need to be further challenged with their education. In addition, social and emotional learning has been implemented in our school testing. Our children are tested 3 or more times a year, all under the guise of understanding the children's level of happiness within their school environment. All of this is implemented by the same legislators who closed schools, masked our children, deprived them of the very breath that God breathed into them, placed plexiglasses between their desks, pushed emergency use authorization of vaccines, all while ignoring the very real mental health issues directly attributed to these measures, and continue with this shandemic today. Now they want to take all this step further and tie everything together on a blockchain. They want to put their health records, mental health records, academic records, discipline records, and their entire life on a blockchain and sell it to them as a matter of convenience. This is nothing more than a really good knockoff designer handbag dressed up as convenience with the final sale of communism. Hello, social credit score. When did the government decide that our children were viewed as simply nothing more than cattle, seen as data mining machines, and eventually will be controlled as a credit score, sold on a blockchain technology linking their earliest childhood educational records to their future career prospects? Did the government think that the people wouldn't notice the slippery slope that our children are on and simply provide consent? Today, I have heard many speakers discuss the laws surrounding privacy and education. The law is on the side of we the people, the parents, and the students. The schools and the legislators have trampled on the laws concerning privacy and well-being of our children, and we do not consent.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, one.
I just want to say, again, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing all those thoughts. I want everyone, just again, to understand, folks here on this panel come from a technology background. They've not come from these educational backgrounds. They're not familiar with a lot of the things that we've been discussing in terms of school district policy and with regard to what's going on with TEA and so on and so forth. So just to kind of give a frame of reference again for the folks here, I feel very confident that the men and women of the panel will take your guidance into the recommendations very, very seriously. So the feedback you've given has been excellent. And so I appreciate that very much.
My email address is on the form.
I'm sorry?
My email address is on the form.
Great,
I'd
great.
be happy to.
Well, I'd love to visit with you further offline. We can schedule a time in my lawmaker capacity outside of being a member of the panel to talk about some of these broader issues. But I appreciate you being here very much. And the insight, I think, is very, very good for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Briefly, I want to say my academic email is on my bio at SMU. And for my other research unaffiliated with this, I would really love to speak with some of you later in hopes also that you have data captured of the terms and conditions that you're agreeing to, that you spoke about, like with your iPad.
They won't
for
share them
example.
with us.
We've
asked.
So anyway, I'm just putting, this is completely separate, but I just have to say, with that regard, please use my email for SMU academic related things and not, I have to separate the things.
Cross-contaminate.
Yeah, thank you. The next three, is Regina Engel back in the room? Okay, so Mitch Klee, are you back in the room? You may not be returning. Melinda Preston, Lee Spiller, and Larry Chiang.
Easiest way to do
Oh,
this.
hey, I
Let me
can
get in the middle,
shift,
because I'm the second.
I'm super easygoing.
It's tight today, and I don't know
We
why.
also did not do that. We don't,
Yeah.
it's not.
Well, I'll talk to
Y'all-
y'all about the design later.
Free pass.
So again, Melinda Preston, Lee Spiller, and Larry Chiang. I may be butchering that last name. It is. Okay, great.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah, Melinda?
Hey, Melinda Preston, thank y'all for letting us speak today. I was going to say good morning, but it's afternoon now. So, first of all, I'm a mom and I'm a grandma of 7. I've also adopted 3 children from Russia. So my heart is to protect our nation. I've seen where my children came from. They were 8, 11, and 12, and they fear that that will come here. So this is where my heart is coming from. What the 4th Industrial Revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities. Klaus Schwab. Digital blockchain should never be mandatory or biometric based. It can never be used for social credit scoring in America. Digital blockchain leads to an all-purpose identifier anyone can use just look at China for a full application. What we need to do is if someone decides not to participate, or this is what will happen, if they decide not to participate in blockchain, it will affect their lives. If it is mandatory, you cannot enroll in school, go to college, seek medical care, do banking, make purchase, or be employed. This will happen. Again, look at China. We already have documentation of how the government has been used to weaponize against Americans. The IRS was, sorry, my alarm's going off to pick somebody up. The IRS was weaponized against conservatives, and recently the Department of Justice weaponized against mothers just for their views. Private companies and the government will reward or punish Americans based on our behavior. By connecting your every online, offline interaction, your digital locker can be connected to every click, comment, and share you make on social media, every financial transaction you record, your location and where you travel. We already know that's happening because how many of y'all watched 2,000 Mules? Hello, we know it's happening. What you buy and sell, your personal health data and medical records, the websites that you visit, your participation in civic functions, how you vote, things like that, how much energy you consume. There is no reason for any company or government to be able to track your activity across all facets of your life, from employment to healthcare to school, or pretty much everything you do. All we have to do is to look at the 30 million people in communist China that are banned from leaving the country, traveling by train or plane, having insurance, renting home, going to restaurants, and taking out a loan, all because of their social credit score. If public-private collaborations were to become the norm, that's what it would mean for us. If and when corporations and states merge under globalist ideologies, how powerful will our vote be? Who would ultimately be running the show after the line between corporation and state is blurred? Convenience can never be at the expense of liberty and freedom. My point to this is it's a very slippery slope. It seems like a really wonderful technology, and it is. Buy something in China and you can watch it get to us. You can see where it's going. You can see you can make sure it's authentic. Isn't that awesome? But the problem is this can be used in a nefarious way. And we, right here, everybody in this room wants it to be used for good, right? We all want it to be used for good, but it can definitely be used to harm us. This is something I want to think, we need to look at it, look at the technology. My husband's a director of a department of technology. He loves what he does, but technology can harm us as well. As good as it can be, it can harm. Protect our families and protect our kids. Wow. Did I get a bonus? Whoa.
You said a lot.
I know. Hello. High five. I get
You set a high bar. Okay. My name is Lee Spiller.
See if
Yes.
there's any
yes.
comments or questions?
Do y'all have any questions? I can tell you about my wonderful children from China. Go ahead.
Definitely bonus points for coming in before the 3 minutes. That was incredible. But no, look, in all seriousness, I want you to know, and I'll speak on behalf of the legislature, we will stop any of this movement to a social scoring system. Let me just be very clear that we will not support that, and we will do everything in our power to stop it. So I wanted to share that with you, that's my view as a legislator, and I know that the vast majority of my colleagues would agree with that. So I just appreciate you coming down and sharing your testimonies again, I share with others. And, we take it to heart what you're sharing. I know every member of this panel takes it to heart. And I think Natalie really echoed your comments earlier about technology can be used for good applications and those that are nefarious. And so we have to recognize that, and this body certainly will do so, endeavor to do so, and the recommendations that it brings between now and the end of October to myself and my fellow colleagues. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. My name is Lee Spiller. I'm with the Citizens Commission on Human Rights of Texas. In general, we are neutral on blockchain. However, you've heard the concerns of so many of the witnesses who are here. And we've kind of had a similar concern that started back in 2016 with the 21st Century Cures Act and all the data interoperability stuff. Those are what's scary. We deal with abuse and fraud in the mental health system. In the early 1990s, nationally, there was rampant fraud and abuse in the inpatient psychiatric hospital chains. You had many people who were inappropriately admitted and held in psychiatric hospitals. By the time I went to work in 1997, people were still going to jail. Lawsuits were still ongoing. And we supported a bill to allow patients to expunge their that were victims of these schemes to expunge their psychiatric records. The question we have is, with an immutable record, if you were wrongfully admitted and fraudulently held, how do you undo that? If it goes in there, it's something that can't be unseen. Simply allowing the patient to correct their record doesn't work because the data itself is discrediting and stigmatizing. I'll give you an example. A patient escaped from an abusive facility. He went missing. We found him. Took him to the doctor to make sure he was okay. The doctor talked to me instead of the patient, in spite of the fact that the patient was perfectly competent, right? As recently as 2016, we started getting these types of allegations again from people calling our abuse line. To date, there has been a hospital chain criminally convicted and a number of lawsuits. How do those people clear their records if they're immutable? The complaints the parents have about the mental assessments at the school, I know the mental assessment some of them have mentioned, and we requested the records. What the school district sent us was the permission for the students to access the school's tech resources and their agreement to the acceptable use policy. We asked again because we didn't think it was responsive, and they said that because their tech team and leadership agreed on it, they felt like that was sufficient. We don't believe so. We really do have to, protect against these types of monitoring and things like that. What we would suggest is, as this moves forward, because a lot of you guys are really expert and really care, we've been impressed by what you've said. A great model is Texas's system of negotiated rulemaking, where you get people from all sides of the issue purposely, and you get in a room and you got to come to consensus, because then we really do get a chance to make sure that everybody's problems are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, would you say your name? I missed it, and I want to make sure that I can contact you.
Yeah, I'm Carla Reyes, and I am, in my non-work group life, I'm an assistant professor of law at SMU Dedman School of Law. And so if you just Google me, you'll find my email on my bio at SMU. Yeah, and please do, I would be very interested in following up with you later.
You bet. Yeah, Dr. Halpern there at SMU is one of my human rights heroes. That guy's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any comments or questions?
Just Lee, I appreciate your thoughtful comments, and you always are very thoughtful when you provide testimony here to the legislature, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this side? No? I'd echo the same. Thank you very much for your time and for your comments.
Thank you.
And Larry Chiang.
Hi, everybody. I'm Larry Chang, and concurrent to my starting my testimony, I'd like to also observe the fact that all 13 committee members have been present and paying attention, whereas in the gallery, there's been how much attrition? 60, 70% attrition. Some speak, some leave, and that's the state that we are all living in, where there is somebody observing. It may be somebody on a Bitcoin, somebody on a blockchain, but somebody's watching and observing from a third party. So congratulations on paying attention, and hopefully some of these testimonies within the next 2 minutes, 30 seconds will be of value to you, because I will focus on, this committee's called Blockchain Matters, Texas Work Group on Blockchain Matters, and I'm surprised as the 23rd expert testimonial giver of semi-expert testimony that I'm surprised that I'm the first person to say this, which is Bitcoin as a catalyst for entrepreneurship here in Austin and statewide. Because Bitcoin, and I'm surprised I'm the first person even talking about this, it's literally a game changer where every aspect of whether we go to school or how we work or monetary fraud is changing. And I'm surprised that, why am I the first person to talk about the fact that kind of everybody needs to learn how to code, and then the countermeasures for code, or the countermeasures to how people use code against us? Because is money energy code? Yes, it is. And is money energy ruled by the three laws of thermodynamics, because we can't argue those universal truths of how the power got here from 50 miles away, how we're going to rule as legislators currently and future legislators, or people who read code as law. Are we going to be reliant and cognizant of these three laws of thermodynamics? Because Bitcoin is here, and it may not be good news for you because maybe you guys didn't buy Bitcoin at $200. But my foundation for coming here is the fact that I did host Joe Kelly in 2009 as a entrepreneur supporting other entrepreneurs. So to wrap and to yield the balance of my time, Bitcoin is a catalyst for entrepreneurship energy here in Austin, Texas.
Thank you. And I'll note as a personal matter that it's much worse for me. I've been working in this space since Bitcoin was worth $10. I didn't buy any back then.
Hugs. Hugs.
So there it is. Any comments or questions? Yeah, Natalie?
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on what you just said about the energetic security provided by the Bitcoin network, and connect that to some of the comments made earlier about the importance of cryptography in safeguarding individual rights. Some of you, may be aware that in the 1990s, cryptography was actually considered a munition whose export from the United States was illegal. It was considered a weapon. That was eventually struck down during the crypto wars of the 1990s, where the federal government in effect backed off and enabled the export and the retail commercialization of cryptography. At this point, I would argue that cryptography is perhaps the most important vanguard of our Second Amendment rights. Rights for individuals to protect themselves. The digital realm is becoming a new frontier, not only of warfare between states, but also of state-society relations. And so I just kind of wanted to echo what you were saying and emphasize the Second Amendment value of some of the technologies, cryptographic technologies connected with Bitcoin that are under development today.
Natalie, I also appreciate your prior comments for immutability and within regards to the Second Amendment and free speech, because that's what Bitcoin is free speech, where it's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle. And specifically with some of the things that we talked about earlier with disclosure, usage, consent, and transparency with our private information, I plead, ask, request, question mark, my earlier testimony before the U.S. House of Representatives under three bills, HR 627, HR 3616, HR 5719, which all go towards the governance of a semi-evil oligopoly. This is not employer opinion, this is Larry Chang opinion of TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax for fair use, consent, transparency to our own private records that were specifically under Congressman Tom Udall and Congressman Tom Campbell, who is now, or Tom Udall is now a senator at Utah, where they hosted me for my expert witness on privacy in the year 2000. So I appreciate the conjoining of both code as law and law as law.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and for your testimony. At this time, I'd call, Zach Whiting or Zach Whitting. I'm not sure if it's Whiting or Whitting. Whiting, thank you, Zach Whiting. Jasmine Pedraza, Jennifer Fleck, and Lindsay Grimont. Grimont? I don't know what the emphasis is. So we'll pull 4 forward, assuming there's still 4 chairs there. Okay. Okay, thank you. And Mr. Whiting, if you just give us a moment, we're distributing your
of course
material. All right, thank you. You may proceed. Well, wait a minute. He's got to start the timer. All right, now you can go.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Reyes and working group members for the opportunity to testify today and for your efforts to study and improve Texas's laws and help the blockchain industry flourish. My name is Zach Whiting. I'm a policy director and senior fellow at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And in my previous life, I was a state legislator. And there's a few suits and hired hands, hired guns in the room. And I want to assure the public witnesses, I won't speak for the work group, but when people drive from 3 and 4 and 5 hours away, their voices are heard, and your voice has very much weight in the room. And I am confident that the working group and the members of the legislature will take the privacy concerns very seriously. And I would just say personally and institutionally, TPPF will be very interested in looking at a data privacy law this session. I'll try to keep my 2 minutes and 30 seconds going here. So I want to answer 2 questions today. Why Texas and what can we do? First, Texas has the potential to be the preeminent powerhouse in America and the world for blockchain technologies because of its people, resources, and values. Texas's population boom presents great workforce opportunities, secondary and post-secondary education, apprenticeships, upskilling, training incentives, and a technologically diverse workforce would take Texas to the next level. Second, what can we do? Texas must retain its reputation as a tax and regulatory friendly state with a light touch, clear, and consistent regulatory framework, not subject to whimsical or arbitrary changes, to give businesses predictability with the long-term future in mind. So some initial policy considerations include, first, ensuring that the law is clear and updated to the 21st century to allow blockchain technologies to thrive in all of their broad applications. It's my understanding that the Uniform Law Commission has been working on a comprehensive update to the Uniform Commercial Code to capture a broad definition of digital assets that may be beneficial to policymakers. Second, incentivize the capture and resale of flare gas to use in enterprises such as crypto mining to provide necessary power and more broadly pursuing greater grid stability. Third, allow payments to the state and local governments in cryptocurrency and encourage the private sector to accept it as a valid form of payment. Other states are beginning to move in that direction, and I don't think Texas should be left behind. And I added this in fourth, to consider distributed ledger technologies in privacy data and cybersecurity applications. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have comments or questions? Pat?
Thank you for joining us today. A couple of questions about existing law. Are you familiar, or do you have a working knowledge of the federal electronic signature law?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Same question about the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act that's been enacted in 49 states?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay.
Yep, sorry.
No, that's all right. I just want to ask.
Yes.
So the next question is fairly asked. You mentioned some policy recommendations. Are there any particular law changes you recommend to provide greater opportunity for the deployment of blockchain here in Texas?
Yeah, so I haven't read, because I don't know if the draft is out for the UCC update. And in my time in the state Senate, I handled a lot of those UCC updates, and I know there are recommendations that states can undertake. I think in a lot of legislation, many times the technology moves faster than I'm kind of getting to an answer to this. Technology often moves much faster than policymakers can.
Certainly.
And so just certainly any thing, and I would be happy to look through the code, in much more depth. I'm actually a new Texas resident, so I'm more familiar with the Iowa code than the Texas code. But just ensuring that that definition is there so that there aren't any hindrances within the code, or if, and I'm not a huge fan of this, but when legislatures give rulemaking authority to agencies, that there aren't any barriers there. So if I could spend a little more time in the code, I can't give you any specific code sections or definitions, but I would imagine that the Uniform Law Commission recommendations may touch on that. They're not the gospel, but I imagine they would touch on that.
I think you might find it very informative and relevant to the nature of your group's work if you take a read through, or at least a skim through, of the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act Texas and 48 other states have enacted it. And you may reach a similar conclusion that that provides a broad legislative framework today for appropriate deployments of blockchain in a variety of settings. And that, in tandem with Article 12, which I hope Texas enacts soon, provides quite a broad legislative framework or legal framework for blockchain. So UETA, Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, you might find interesting reading. Not too late at night, though.
Yep, I appreciate that. Might help me fall asleep. Thank you for that.
Briefly, to one of the points you semi-raised in passing, the draft, the Uniform Law Commission UCC draft, just met with approval at the ALI, so last week. So, because it's a joint ALI ULC project and goes to the ULC for final vote in July. So I imagine that if it's not already posted to the ULC website, it will be shortly in preparation for that meeting in July.
Very good. If I was supposed to inform the committee with anything, I feel like I've not done that, and you guys have educated and informed me, so thank you for that.
Madam Chair. Zach, appreciate you being here, and the Texas Public Policy Foundation obviously has got a long and storied history of doing a wonderful job for creating conservative policy ideas that we've implemented here on a whole wide range of topics over many decades. And so one of the things I'd like to ask that you all would do, particularly with regard to privacy-related matters and the discussion that you've heard, the whole debate and discussion the last 3 or 4 hours, the input we've gotten from concerned citizens. I really love to have you guys help us with regard to how we craft solutions to address these issues, right? So the issues that you're hearing today are not just about blockchain. They are broader than blockchain technology. And I would love to hear TPPF's thoughts and guidance and to take into account some of the feedback that you're hearing from folks in the room and to interact with everyone that's here. So I just appreciate you being here and want to task TPPF with considering that going forward.
Yes, sir. It is absolutely, it is the top item on my research agenda. I've just assigned it to another staffer. I will be overseeing it, so we will hopefully produce some research and potentially some legislative recommendations. So thank you. We will be happy to help.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Jasmine Pedraza.
I'm a parent in North Austin, Williamson County, and firstly, I just wanted to thank everyone in this room for being here today to discuss blockchain technology in K through 12 schools. And thank you for giving the public the opportunity to give testimony. I wish there was a bit more transparency and awareness when it comes to blockchain technology. Many people in my community are not aware of this hearing, and many of them do not even know or fully understand what blockchain is. But I myself do have a bit of understanding of what it's used for, and I understand that blockchain isn't completely new and is already in place to some degree. But I still have questions. Who will have access to my child's block of info? What will it be used for? And will there be an option to opt out of it to protect my child and I's right to privacy? I understand that possible economic growth and development opportunities will be discussed. As someone who comes from a historically underrepresented minority, there have been multiple times where I've heard individuals affiliated with the government or otherwise advocating for new policies and technology to be introduced to help marginalized communities. But in my experience, many of those communities have not benefited from certain new policies, and in some cases, even end up worse off. So I don't blame folks for being wary of hearing the words, "I am from the government and I'm here to help." But even if I give this the benefit of the doubt, even in doing so, all I ask is to please give the people the opportunity to opt out if that is what they wish. That concludes my public comment, and I would like to thank all of you again for your time, and take care.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have comments or questions?
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you very much. I met Elizabeth Dark. Jennifer Fleck.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, panel. I appreciate you listening to all of us today. I'd like to give two really gritty examples because it's just boots on the ground. I am here representing myself and as a parent of a child at various ages for the last 25 years in public schools. And also as an attorney, I'm very interested in the law and the law being enforced, which in public schools, it's not being enforced. And that's because the laws are drawn up and created very sloppily. And we need to do a better job. So recently, I am in Lake Travis, so I'm in West Austin. Recently, under the FERPA Act, a parent can ask for all of their child's education records that are being stored by vendors that identify my child personally. And you can make that request and it's due within 45 days. So that deadline passed last month and my school district responded to me that they're trying to get the information from Google, Zoom, Quizlet, Schoology, Nearpod, Microsoft, Jupyter, GoGuardian, all of the different software vendors, but they're having a difficult time getting that information that's required. They're required to furnish that to me as a parent for free, and they can't get it. And so we write all these laws and then nobody follows them. So I just keep that in mind when you're making recommendations to our government. And then second to that, I serve on the Lake Travis SHAC, which is a health committee that's in every district in Texas. And recently, the state adopted a health textbook called Good Heart Wilcox against many opposing parents' viewpoints. And in that textbook, includes a lot of surveys that you've heard about today about they're asking our child about their mental health. Are you feeling suicidal? Is your home suicide proof? I mean, crazy, ridiculous, personal questions that aren't allowed under federal law. And as a SHAC member, I asked our school district, would you please put parents on notice that their students are being surveyed, and would you ask their permission and also give them a copy of the results, and who are we selling this information to? Who are we providing this information to? And the district denied my request, voted me down, and actually looked at me like I had three heads. So I just want to say that, and I don't know how blockchain exactly weaves into all of this, but we've talked a lot about data privacy. I would also say data collection is a concern, data accessibility is a concern, and transparency, accountability, so all of these things. If blockchain is going to make this situation better, great. If blockchain is going to make this situation worse, then I'm opposed to blockchain. I don't trust our schools and I don't trust our government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or questions?
Appreciate the feedback. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Lindsay Grimont or Gremont?
Either one is fine. Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me? Yep. I am Lindsay Grimont, and I'm here today representing myself. But as a background perspective, I did work for IBM for 15 years before just being an entrepreneur and taking care of my children. So I totally understand I don't totally understand the blockchain technology, but I do understand that all of you here are coming from a technical background and are going to be making more technical recommendations to influence policy. And I do believe that this technology is here. It's likely here to stay, and it is probably necessary in many cases. And so I'm not here to say that I oppose blockchain, and a lot of different people here have provided privacy issues and whatever, so I'm not necessarily going to focus on that. But I do very much appreciate this chairperson's comments earlier. As a Gen Xer, I clearly remember the movie Real Genius, if anyone else here remembers that with Val Kilmer. Technology can be used for nefarious purposes and has unintended consequences. And so that's why I'm here today. And I do think that there are things that you guys could do, and I'm not going to presume that what I'm about to say is fully thought through, but I hope it provides something thought-provoking for you. So I don't think anyone here would intend for blockchain to be used for control and enslavement, as other people have said, but that is exactly the direction it could go if we allow it to. So, and a lot of the time, what's sold as convenience or sold as, economic building or equity serving, and all these terms, that's how they throw us into something that maybe erodes our liberties. And so, social credit system is a real thing. It's already happening in so many ways. So we just need to protect Texans. So as the work group, what I would like to recommend is maybe putting in place some kind of wording around that any, virtual digital currency that might be coming in the future, we know is probably coming in the future, that it may not be programmable. If we could just say that it can't be programmable, like with the soft fork, hard fork, whatever terminology you use, that would keep any future government from saying, okay, centralizing the control and allowing things for saying, okay, if you get paid $100, 40 of it goes this way and 50 of it goes that way and the rest can go another way. We don't want something like that. So we wouldn't want anything to be programmable. So that would be a simple way to maybe mitigate that piece of it. A second thing would be that no corporation can do business in Texas if they do not allow any virtual currency as a means for exchange to any new digital dollar. We could say that in Texas, right? That you cannot do business here if you're going to say, I'm sorry, we don't take Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, we don't take Ethereum as a means of exchange. That would be something very smart to do that we could do now to mitigate that coming in the future. A third thing would be that Texas requires any new digital currency coming from the central bank world or the federal government or a world government, whatever the case may be, to be pegged to a tangible commodity. What that is, I don't know, but let's peg it to something, because that is, I think, the biggest factor with any growth of any digital currency is what is it, right? And how easy can it go down or up? Is it modeling the markets? What's going on? We need to peg it to something, or else it could be gone in a heartbeat, as we're all seeing right now. So end of story. If there's no physical store of value for any kind of virtual currency, then what value is the blockchain or all these things we're talking about? If you just all of a sudden don't have any way to buy anything, right, then that would stop any economic growth in Texas. So we can protect Texans that way with these three key things. So if anyone wants to talk about those more later, I'm happy to chat more, but and I don't know how to technically implement any of that, but I think that those would be good policies to mitigate things coming in the future.
Any comments or questions? I think I have one clarifying question, which is when you say you don't want the digital currency to be programmable, and then you used your example, or what are you saying that you don't want there to be a backdoor where someone, government or otherwise, could come in and change what you wanted to do with your currency?
And this is where it gets into some of the technical matters, so maybe someone more technical could help me out here, but it's like if the blockchain is set up a certain way and then all of a sudden someone can come in and fork it to go a different way, that's what I mean by programmable. And if you have a pretty hard fork in the road, then the blockchain itself and how you thought it was going to be implemented isn't going to be implemented that way anymore, and that what you had before that was really great for everyone becomes not great anymore, because it's saying you can only shop at this grocery store if you have this kind of vaccine or whatever, right? So we don't want to allow for something like that to happen. So if you just have some very simple wording to mitigate something like that coming down from on high from some other, organization that is, like the central banks providing the currency, then at least Texans would be protected.
Okay, thank you.
I just appreciate your comments broadly on those topics, and I just want to reiterate again, in terms of a national digital currency, it's a big no for Texas, period, end of story, full stop.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm just bringing it up because
Yeah.
it's blockchain.
No,
right?
just so we're very clear, that's an absolute no-go. The concept of tying a currency to something that is tangible, of course, I wish we never left the gold standard here with a tie back to the U.S. dollar. So appreciate your comments very, very much. Jennifer, your perspective a moment ago, I'm sorry that you felt shut out or not given an opportunity to be able to be heard at your local school district level. And so I just want to let you know that from a legislative perspective, our doors are open. Come see us. Let's talk about issues that you've experienced and happy to address them further. So thank you.
Thanks very much to each of you. Thank you for your time and for your comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then the last three on our list. So if I don't call your name and you're in this room because you still intend to speak, you must fill out a witness card. This will be the last time I announce that, so I don't just annoy everyone who already did. But I have John Montague, Teresa Thomas, and Steve Swanson. Thank you. Let's give him a moment to sit and then. All right, John Montague, am I saying last name correctly?
Yes. I just wanted to start and say thank you all so much for doing this and forming this group. Had the opportunity to speak some with Caesar, who I know cannot be here today, and he informed me of the public hearing. I'm just delighted to be here. Given Texas's resources and eminent talent in this area, I think it's very important that you all are looking at this from a critical perspective and evaluating policy options. And as a former Lock Lord alumni, Pat, it's really good to see you here. So I'm going to start, and I'm actually going to read something. Benjamin Franklin wrote that the reminiscence of our people is paying taxes is highly blamable, and that all property seems to be a creature of public conviction. All property that is necessary to man for the conservation of the individual and the propagation of his species is his natural right, which none can justly deprive him of. But all property is superfluous to the purposes of the property of the public, who by their laws have created it, and who may therefore by other laws dispose of it whenever the welfare of the public shall demand such disposition. He that does not like civil liberty or society on these terms, let him retire and live among the savages. Why do I say this? When we really start thinking about it, our property rights have just as much to do with those who are participating in society or networks. That is, we all participate in each other's property rights. And I think that's a really interesting way to think about cryptocurrency. My background is I'm a securities attorney, worked at Lock Lord, and now I focus on working with DAOs. In particular, I do a lot of work which is publicly available with City DAO, one of the first legally recognized DAOs in Wyoming, and there's just a Harvard Business Journal article about them. But I had three main legislative points that I'd like to, for you all to consider. And I'm sure you all are already contemplating, and Chairwoman, I got to read some of your work, and obviously you're doing a lot of great work in the space, so we'll be curious on your feedback. I would encourage that the Texas legislature carve out a statutory concept of public goods within the crypto space and make sure that the assimilation has the full protection of the Texas government and cannot be infringed or meddled with by the federal government. I think that there are some securities laws issues which could be handled at the state level by providing liability protection for those in early stage crypto projects that register such projects with the Texas Secretary of State or Securities Division. Such projects can be commercial in nature or represent a public good for citizens in Texas or other potential. Oh, do I have time? In any case, I would encourage the working group to contemplate these issues in their report to the legislature. Lastly, it would be great for Texas to explore a stablecoin. The Texas government will likely need to be paid in such stablecoin, and having the backing of the Texas government and commodities will help provide additional fiat on-ramps and education for crypto and unlock another level of innovation in that state. By stablecoin, I do not mean that this necessarily needs to be pegged to the US dollar, but it could be a pool of resources or other assets that is determined by the legislature or their subject matter experts. Regarding some of the other testimonies today, I'm going to quote from Mark Twain. I think there's been a lot of incredible testimonies. I think there are some people that need to be more informed and educated in blockchain. And I thought this committee has done a great job of hearing everybody, being present, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, Grant Weston. When you're talking about stable coins and as far as you say it'd be great for the state to have it, I'm not sure I fully understand the specific reason as to why or for what purpose, what use. Like, and if not pegged to the dollar, what basket would you be expecting?
So going back to what somebody said earlier, I mean, I'm a big fan of we could just go back to the gold standard. That's not going to happen. Right, but I think there are assets within Texas. Oil is obviously on a great run. I don't think that's for me to determine. I think if citizens are looking to put their crypto assets in something less volatile, what do you have right now? You have a couple options. You had Terra, which is now at zero basically, because there's an algorithmically managed stablecoin that got wrecked. I think I'm not very confident in a lot of those, but they do utilize blockchain technology. So utilizing blockchain technologies for some basket of oil, other stable coin currencies, it could be pegged to the US dollar, but if Texas is integrating blockchain technologies within public infrastructure, there needs to be some sort of on-rail or off-ramp, and that might not be Ethereum or Bitcoin. It could be Ethereum or Bitcoin, but it may want to be some hybrid of assets, and I think you all are in a unique position to be able to make that happen, utilize University of Texas, which is one of the best universities in the world, among other universities in Texas, to work on solving that problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you very much. I do have one question. You mentioned City DAO is one of the first formed under the Wyoming law. Do you have thoughts about Texas entity law and recommendations as to what we should be looking with Texas entity law?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with Caesar a couple weeks ago about this, and I think a lot of lawyers take the approach, LLC law is sort of creates a legal fiction in which you have liability protection for market participants. Does that exist already within Texas's Limited Liability Company Act? I think it probably does. I think what having a further law would help is provide sort of context as to what algorithmically managed means to the extent those concepts want to be introduced, and also provide further reinforcement to entrepreneurs coming to Texas and looking to establish things within Texas. So I think a supplement to the Limited Liability Company Act, which actually contemplates digital assets. The main issue with digital assets within the current Limited Liability Company Act infrastructure, I would say, is a lot having to do with consent because they're all very fluid. People are participating in networks, are in projects, and they're leaving, and they're trading on secondary markets. So I think there are some enhancements, and I think there's even some enhancements from what other jurisdictions that, like Wyoming, have done. And given the vast amount of companies that are moving here, I think it could be a really attractive thing for Texas to be able to contemplate a clear framework.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for your time, for your comments, and for answering our questions. Teresa Thomas?
Yes, thank you. I did not come here to speak, but after listening to a lot of the testimony,
I feel compelled. I was going to come up here with a 3-sentence statement, but it continues to grow. First, I would like to advise that I'm an Indigenous female, and being called a savage, I do not take offense, because Benjamin Franklin had quite the storied journey to his becoming one of our founding fathers. As you probably know from history, that he had quite a storied apprenticeship where he was found not to be quite honest, and thank goodness he did not have blockchain following him to become one of our founding fathers. So I will just state that, sir. I don't consider not supporting Bitcoin or this type of monetary that we as Texans would be savages by denying that. Going further, I'm a child advocate for over 35 years. I am also a SHAC member. I have one thing to state after hearing testimony. You all are, if this blockchain proceeds, it will be one of the biggest rallying points for money follows the child. Yes, blockchain lack of privacy is huge on boots on the ground. It is huge. To say it is not a tech issue. This is a parental rights issue. This is a civil rights issue. The child does not belong to the state. It doesn't belong to the school. The child belongs to the parents. This is America. I remember as being a child advocate 30-something years ago, you used to hear teachers in the hallway saying, that child's going to give you problems when they come to your grade. Thank goodness that didn't follow them. Now I went to another school board meeting. I heard employees saying, after a mother got up and said her child had been sexually assaulted at the school, after another mother had said her son was suicidal. I won't share what employees told me, but sir, this is being documented. This is real. I'm a child advocate. I'm not here to condemn schools. I'm here to support them, to build them up, but to help you all with legislation to help these children and not continue to harm them. Children belong to the parents. This is a parents' rights issue. Thank you. And if you have questions, I've been doing this 35 years. I have stories, but I'm telling you, sir, this is wrong.
Thank you for being here, first of all, and thank you most of all for being a CASA advocate for all those years. We're very grateful to you. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Steve Swanson?
Good morning. Good afternoon. I must start by saying I'm very impressed with this gathering today. I've spent a lot of time up in this building in the last 15 years and at commission hearings. This is the most interactive, in-depth, knowledgeable group of people I've found at the legislature in the state of Texas, and I'm grateful. My name is Steve Swanson. I'm a retired business executive and engineer and programmer. I'll throw that in there. And been a public education advocate in the state of Texas for 30 years, and I've learned a lot. In my profession, I learned that what is written and drawn to build, you follow. What I've discovered in legislation in the state of Texas is what is written to follow to take care of the kids of our lives isn't even seen. This conversation, and you've heard law talked about a lot today, and we're in the process of helping cast light on opportunities that existing laws provide us. Reason I chose to spoke today is we've heard about data and privacy and technology. I started my technology life with something called a slide rule. And I taught kids in college, the ones that had a handheld calculator that took square roots were way ahead of everybody else. So I've lived the technology journey in my profession as an engineer for 30, 40 years. And I embraced it. I learned how to use it and to program it and have it improve and be used as a tool. That's a magic word. Technology is a tool. And in the last 10, 15 years, I've become very concerned about the use of technology in all forms or fashions. And my message today is, let us not lose our humanity. Let us not give our judgment away to a machine. More importantly, let us not depend on the machine. And I learned this lesson 30 years ago reading an engineering news record article about a 40-story building, structural steel building in the Midwest that was designed, structural steel framework, designed, approved by the city, went through the bidding process, and it got to the fabrication stage where a person takes the drawings and creates a picture for each piece of steel. And that person asked the following question: why is the column on the top of this building bigger than the one on the bottom? Can you imagine a toothpick supporting a 40-story building with a clunk of concrete on the top? It got all the way to the detailer, and he discovered that. The reason was the computer program turned the building upside down, and nobody saw it. So what I've learned in my profession is you have to know what the answer looks like before you depend on the machine. You have the machine help you get the answer. But if you just put data in and get data out, we're lost. And unfortunately, that's happening in education, and I'm here to say it's happening, I've experienced in healthcare. What you guys are about, and with the parents here who are involved in education, the dialogue you're having, is critical not only for the future of Texas, but the future of our humanity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Swanson?
Appreciate you being here, and keep the humanity in what we're doing. That's a powerful message. Thank you, sir.
At this point, I'm supposed to read something about concluding the meeting, but I don't know what I'm supposed to read. Hold on. It doesn't tell me, actually. So, anyone else meant to speak but didn't fill out a witness card? No, because I don't want to cut it off unless if there's someone who would still wants to speak. If not, I just conclude the meeting.
Well, yeah, the meeting is adjourned.
Okay, in that case, the meeting is adjourned. Do I smack the gavel?
Smack the gavel.
Thank you.